Meeting for Thursday, May 18th, 2023. As you can see, there are several of the commissioners who are remote who will be joining us in today's process. We also have a number of speakers who will also be remote. So if we have technical difficulties, please bear with us as we will try to move along effectively. So, Laura, if you'll call the roll, please.
Commissioner Curran,
Here.
Commissioner Doherty,
Here.
Commissioner Floyd.
Here.
Commissioner Japong Porter,
Is en route, and she will be here shortly as soon as she gets AAA to fix her flat tire.
Commissioner Miletus,
Here.
and Chair Revolve.
Friend.
Here.
Morning.
Is that?
Frank,
Is
could
that?
I get the deposit airbook and put mine in? I'll give it back to you.
And Marshall, how is she not muted? Okay.
Are we good?
Yep.
And that's why we're asking for patience. So, we need an approval, a motion to approve the April 20th commission meetings.
Chair, I move to approve the April 20th, 2023 commission meeting minutes as written.
Or
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Miletus,
Yes.
Chair Revolve.
yes. So we're going to begin today's session, and if any of you have taken an opportunity to take a look at the agenda, it is quite full. And we're going to move as quickly as possible. We want to have all the stakeholders who are involved with OLCC to have an opportunity to express their beliefs and their feelings on what we're going to be dealing with, and is the public comment on the additional 50-cent surcharge. In order to try to give everyone an equal opportunity or an equitable opportunity, we're going to ask that you make your presentation be 3 minutes, and we will go from there. You may be asked questions that will not go into your 3 minutes, and so that may go to 10 minutes. But at some point, I may say thanks very much and move on. So that's what we're going to do, and I believe we have a list. Oh,
We do have a list, and sorry, I forgot to tell you this. There's some handwritten numbers on the side. We have people with time constraints today, so we're gonna probably pop around a little bit.
I'm going to let you do that.
So first up would be Dr. Tim Naney, and that's virtual.
Do I just plunge ahead?
Yeah.
Great. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tim Namey. I'm the director of the Canadian Institute for Substance Use Research at the University of Victoria. Thanks for having me. Just by background, I'm a physician who's board certified in internal medicine, pediatrics, and preventive medicine. Prior to my present position, I was a senior epidemiologist with the CDC alcohol team in Atlanta, and then a researcher studying alcohol policies at Boston University. I know the OLCC is familiar with pricing policies, and I'm aware that you instituted minimum pricing for spirits a couple of years back. Today, of course, we're talking about the increasing the price on a bottle of distilled spirits by 50 cents, the surcharge. So I might start off by pointing out that since there are about 17 standard drinks per 750 ml bottle of 40% ABV spirits, this amounts to only an increase of 3 cents per standard drink. So it's a pretty modest amount. And then I just wanted to make 4 additional points. The first is that higher taxes and prices reduce consumption and heavy drinking in particular. You've probably heard this before. This is based on hundreds and hundreds of studies in the US and elsewhere. These higher prices and taxes are associated with reduced per capita or total consumption, reduced binge drinking, and less alcohol use disorder. And it's not surprising that reductions in total consumption correspond to reductions in heavy drinking, since the top 20% heaviest drinkers consume about 80% of the alcohol. Number 2 is higher taxes and prices reduce health-related social and economic harms. Again, in terms of health, higher prices reduce total deaths, liver disease, at least 7 types of cancer, motor vehicle crashes, and suicides. Socially, less drinking is associated with less interpersonal violence like domestic violence and sexual assaults and other alcohol-related crimes and property crimes and vandalism. Then there's also the economic costs, which are further reduced by higher prices. These are in the form of healthcare costs, legal costs, and criminal justice system costs. Point number 3 is that higher taxes and surcharges are fair in that those who drink more pay more, those who drink less pay less, and those who don't drink at all pay nothing. And as a group, it's also important to note that low-income persons tend to be less likely to drink at all and to drink less when they do. The 4th point is that higher prices protect vulnerable citizens. The first subpoint here is that by raising the price of alcohol and preventing harms, any death or alcohol-caused problem that is prevented would have occurred to someone who was otherwise vulnerable to the effects of alcohol. After all, they would have died or something bad would have happened to them. And the second is that pricing policies have the greatest benefit for those in lower income brackets and youth. This is based on theory and based on studies, and this is for 2 reasons. The first is that on a per drink basis, lower income folks and young persons incur more problems and higher rates of death than those in high incomes. This is called the harms paradox.
Take your closing point.
Sure. And the other reason is that people in lower incomes have less disposable income, so they're more responsive or more likely to spend their money elsewhere. So thanks for letting me present, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Questions for Dr. Commissioner.
So we heard at our last meeting that Oregon has the 2nd highest costing liquor. So in the country, our liquor costs more than every other state. We're the highest costing state except for one other state. But our consumption and our problems with substance abuse is much greater. So it doesn't appear, it seems like we have been increasing the price, but we have not been getting the results that we want. And I was wondering if you could comment on that, or maybe acknowledge that there isn't an exact causal link to raising prices will lower consumption.
Sure. Yeah, that's a question to me.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. There are many factors that go into it. The total price is kind of, generally speaking, is the key, but then there are a lot of other factors too, whether a state is urban or rural, the types of healthcare coverage there can be. So no, it's not a perfect relationship, and there are many things that contribute to alcohol-related problems. The other thing is that it's important to understand, and I don't know specifically, but what percentage of all alcohol consumed in Oregon is spirits versus beer and wine, where the price portfolio may be different. The other thing is that when you're a monopoly, I guess that you've got the have a lot of control over the spirits market. So that's an advantage in terms of business.
Sure. And you also made a comment about that there was 3 cents per drink, so it's not really going to raise the price a lot. We also heard a lot of testimony last time that businesses are actually going to be the ones absorbing most of the costs, so that it actually won't go to the consumers. So do you think that would defeat the purpose of raising the costs, is if these businesses are actually having to absorb those costs?
Well, typically I can't say what would happen specifically in Oregon, but most studies show that when prices are raised through taxes or minimum prices, that in fact, those costs are typically passed on to consumers, sometimes at even greater than the amount of the increase themselves. That's called the pass-through. That's what typically happens. So usually it's not businesses. The other thing is just to keep in mind, and I totally acknowledge your point, it's a good point, but that to the extent that people consume a little bit less of one particular product, they spend their money elsewhere in the economy. So it's not necessarily a net loss to the economy. It sometimes results in a reallocation of spending. But again, I think at 3 cents per drink, that's likely to be pretty minimal in this case.
Thank you.
Commissioners? Thank you, sir. Oh, Dennis?
Yes. I've got another question here, and I don't know if we can answer it here, but I've heard and had heard testimony that Oregon is rated as very poor when it comes to treating alcoholism, or we have more alcoholism issues than other states. And I don't know that that pinpoints to pricing. I don't know, is that a shortage of capacity for alcohol treatment, the number of facilities, number of beds, or number of outpatient programs or support groups? How does that play into this, or could you speak to that?
Sure. Well, there are three major factors that go into the consumption. The first is kind of the underlying, culture and also the composition of the residents. So, typically somebody's familial country of origin has a big impact on how they drink. Their religious affiliation has a big impact on they drink. These are sort of things that we can't really change. And, for better or worse, they are what they are. Then the other two things, as you mentioned, the things that we can sort of change are the public policies that sort of that allow drinking to occur, but that encourage people to not consume excessively. And then the third, and I would say actually less important one is treatment. That is very, very important. But in terms of, reducing harms, the major things that you can do that with are these public policies. So treatment and access to resources is important, but and again, there are a variety of factors.
Okay, thank you.
So
Sure.
you'd say, wouldn't you say being a control state is probably a pretty big factor in trying to preserve that? I mean, control states are helpful in terms of curbing addiction.
I would agree with that statement. There are some control states that act in a way that frankly doesn't maximize their monopoly status. So the monopoly status is kind of nice because one can raise prices and can actually, depending on how the money is allocated, actually industry can make more money while improving public health. A monopoly is a really good thing to have. So again, it can be, and typically government monopolies, working in conjunction with the private sector tend to be kind of less aggressive and more in terms of marketing, and they're better about age verification and things of those nature. So in general, not uniformly, but they're generally considered better for public health than a fully privatized model.
Thank you. Thank you, Arch, for your time. Laura?
Jason Johnson would be next, but I'm not sure he's on. Okay, so let's go with Cheryl Ramirez.
Please introduce yourself. And once you've done that, the time will start.
Good morning, members of the OLCC Commission. My name is Cheryl Ramirez, and I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Oregon Community Mental Health Programs. We're a trade association that represents the community mental health programs, or CMHPs, across the state that manage their local behavioral health system and provide direct services for mental illness and for substance use disorders in their communities. They provide for substance use disorders, they provide everything from prevention, like education, outreach, to at-risk populations, to therapeutic treatment. And they also subcontract with other providers for things like medical and clinical withdrawal management, things like that. CMHPs receive Medicaid funding primarily from CCOs, and they receive also non-Medicaid funding. One source is from the Mental Health, Alcoholism, and Drug Services account through contracts with the Oregon Health Authority. But this funding is not sufficient for all the needs in our communities for people with substance use disorders. And as you've already heard, different things work for different people. So we need a whole continuum of substance use disorder treatment in the communities. So I'm here to support the 50-cent surcharge increase on sales of distilled spirits. You already heard the public health case that has been made, so I'll just echo those comments that made by a previous speaker. But I do want to focus in on something we see in the public behavioral health system, which is a strong connection between alcohol use, homelessness, and justice involvement. Just look at the overrepresentation of people at the state hospital who are not able to aid and assist in their own defense because of underlying mental illness. The majority of this group also has substance use disorders and is homeless. And another example, 42% of the people who go to the Deschutes Crisis Stabilization Center have co-occurring mental illness and substance use disorders, and 22% are intoxicated upon arrival. So it's a big issue. So how can we support the SUD treatment continuum in the communities through surcharge increase? There are a number of ways. First, we need much more funding and prevention, outreach, engagement, early intervention. So we prevent the bad outcomes and death in the first place. We need much more funding for substance use disorder residential treatment. People in our communities are waiting months to get it into a residential treatment facility when they need that. We need funding for sobering and stabilization services and longer term services for people with chronic alcohol addiction. And lastly, and most importantly, we need funding for our biggest resource, most important resource, and that's the workforce. We need people to provide these services in the community. That's where most of our funding goes. So we urge your support for the surcharge increase on distilled spirits, and thanks for the opportunity to testify.
Commissioners. I have a question. In that some of the research I've done shows that Oregon has a shortage of behavioral professionals, over 12,000 shortage. What is the industry, or what could be done on the industry side? And I also know because of the Affordable Care Act, there is insurance that handles mental health, drug, and alcohol abuse inside every insurance contract that's produced in this state.
That's a huge question. We're doing a lot to develop our workforce in the public behavioral health system, which is where I'm focusing. We see people with the most severe and chronic conditions, and insurance doesn't pay for all those services. So we're patching it together. We got some Medicaid, we got some state general fund, we got some tax funding, and we try to patch it together, but it's still very under-resourced and has been forever since we've had a community-based behavioral health system. So we're trying very hard to increase the wages in the public system so people will stay. But the fact is they can make a lot more money doing telehealth in the private sector than they can when they have to be in person helping people through very, very rough times in the public system. So we need to get the pay structure changed and increased. And we're working very hard with our state and with our legislature to increase the rates of behavioral health, both mental health care and substance use disorder care. And really trying to focus on incentives to both recruit and retain the workforce. So there's a lot going on in that space.
So that makes me ask another question as related to that, because whenever I want to tease our executive director or DOJ, if you go into a courtroom and you have an individual who doesn't have an attorney or can't afford this level of practice, the judge will say, guess what? You just got assigned to that. But when I'm dealing with clients, many of the providers out there won't accept the OHP or the Medicare cut in pay. And so they get to skip out on that completely. And for the group who most needs that services, do you think perhaps there should be some legislative fixes that will require the medical providers or mental health providers to see individuals who can't necessarily afford to pay for or their insurance, or even to accept their insurance, but they won't?
It's another very large policy question. I can say, representing the public behavioral health system, we take everybody. And in fact, we really focus on people who are either underinsured or uninsured or have Medicaid or Medicare. They're just, so the state general fund can't cover all those gaps. And so we're looking to taxes. For example, the tobacco tax paid for our first big push for mobile crisis response about 7 years ago. So without the tobacco tax, we wouldn't have even been able to start our 24/7 mobile crisis response. So we rely on all kinds of things to patch that together. So I'm in agreement with you. I got frustrated that not everybody is taking everybody who needs the care, but the fact is, in the private space, they can't probably provide all those services that we provide in the public system. So, thanks.
Commissioner?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let the record show that Commissioner Port has arrived. thank you for fixing your tire. Laura,
Okay, just try one more time. Jason Johnson, are you on? Okay, let's go to Joe Buck. Tom Herrick. In person.
please introduce yourself, and once you've done that, we'll start the time.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. For the record, I'm Tom Herrick. I'm the Director of State Affairs for American Distilled Spirits Alliance. Our membership makes up more than 70% of the distilled spirits manufactured and sold in the United States. Our alliance supports you. We support the OLCC, but we must oppose this proposed price increase, make that the doubling of what was supposed to be a temporary surcharge. It was March 2009, so that was 14 years ago. That's how long it's been since the original surcharge of 50 cents per bottle has been adopted and been being paid by Oregonians. And I would note it'll be 16 years worth of temporary before that comes before you for reconsideration in 2025. So we continue to oppose the original surcharge, let alone doubling it to $1 per bottle as proposed in the governor's budget. It's been well established that Washington State has the highest alcohol excise tax in the country, 4 times the national average. Those taxes result in some of the highest retail prices paid for by Washingtonians. Yet the state's overall consumption is basically in the middle of the pack at number 20 or so based on whatever study you might look at. Oregon, as Commissioner Kern had already pointed out, is number 2 in the country, behind only Washington. Our overall consumption also in the middle of the pack at around number 25. So do responsible Oregonians really want to be number 1 in alcohol taxes paid? I live here and I sure don't think so. If higher taxes and therefore higher retail prices have an immediate impact and inverse correlation to consumption, the current scenario in Washington or Oregon simply doesn't bear that out. Higher prices might change purchasing behavior as consumers change brands, change alcohol types based on price or availability. Purchasing behavior might change, but long before consumption decreases. My board member from Hood River Distillers did a terrific job last month, noting the unique challenges of Oregon distillers. And my colleague from the Oregon Restaurant Lodging Association really nailed it with regard to the pandemic, supply chain, cost increase issues already facing the hospitality industry. So I'll skip those topics and close with this. The recent economic forecast estimates a nearly $2 billion surplus in this biennium. That, plus the significant new taxes and revenues that is forecast once the new warehouse becomes operational, may provide record alcohol revenues in the next several years. And in turn, add additional funding for the important work being done by the addiction and recovery community. So doubling the per bottle surcharge should not be adopted. Not now, and we urge you to reject it. Thank you for your time.
Commissioners, questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, next up we have Jason Johnson, remote.
Hello, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can.
Jason, please
Very good,
introduce yourself, and once you've done so, the time will begin.
Yes. Well, thank you, Commissioner and Commissioners, for the time today. I want to sincerely thank you for allocating time for public comment on the topic of an additional 50-cent surcharge, which I am against. My name is Jason Johnson. I'm the founder of Double Circle Spirits, and I'm proud to be an Oregon pioneer. My dream was to take the wheat raised by my family outside of the Dalles and make craft spirits telling the story of Oregon. At Double Circle Spirits, my wife and I have full-time day jobs. We spend our mornings, evenings, weekends working on our spirits business. It's just the 2 of us. We're so small that everything we do is the least efficient and absolutely the most expensive. I have a philosophy of keeping every penny prisoner, so I try to find ways to save pennies on bottles, labels, corks, storage, shipping, etc. I have to buy more supplies than I need to take advantage of price breaks in order to save pennies. For example, 1,000 labels is $1.41. 4,000 labels is 68 cents each, and 5,000 labels is 65 cents each. I buy 5,000 labels and tie up cash flow to get a cheaper cost per unit. If this passes, we have a decision to make. Unlike other consumer packaged goods products, we are limited in ways we can take pricing. We either take the retail price up or we reduce our margin by eating the cost increase. Taking the price up makes us even less competitive against national brands, and you can only reduce your margin so much. With every single input cost up double digits, the margin runway for me is getting much shorter, getting shorter and shorter. If this surcharge passes, just like the surcharge that's in current existence, it will negatively affect the smallest the most. Please vote no on the proposal, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners? Thank you very much.
We'll try Joe Buck one more time. Okay, so we'll go to the regular list. Lance Mayhew.
Close enough.
That's why I asked, please introduce yourself.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners and Mr. Executive Director. I'm Lance Mayhew. I'm the General Manager of Aviation American Distillery, proud member of Diageo's portfolio of brands. Our operations include a distillery, packaging facility, and visitors experience located in Portland, Oregon. We appreciate the opportunity to express our opposition to the proposed additional surcharge, 50 cents per bottle, on distilled spirits products under consideration by the OLCC. The distilled spirits industry is a vital part of the Oregon economy. We provide jobs and revenue for the state. However, increasing the surcharge could lead to job losses and potentially jeopardize the viability of local businesses, making it difficult for them to remain operational. We're deeply concerned about the impact that this surcharge would have on the local economy. Our distilleries are an important part of the Oregon community, and they shouldn't be penalized for operating in a highly competitive market. Oregon's taxes on distilled spirits already rank among the highest in the nation, and they shoulder almost the entire alcohol tax burden in the state. It's clear that distilled spirits pay an inequitable share of alcohol taxes. In the current biennium, distilled spirits are projected to account for over 95% of all alcohol tax revenues collected, compared to beer, wine, and cider. So it's an understatement to say the distilled spirits industry has already been paying their fair share. I understand that the OLCC is considering this surcharge as a way to generate revenue for the state, but I believe that there are better ways to achieve this goal. Instead of imposing additional costs on businesses and consumers, the state should focus on creating a more business-friendly environment that continues to encourage growth and innovation. As a responsible and valued member of the industry, we urge you to reconsider the impact of this surcharge on our business and the state's economy. We thank you for the opportunity to share our oppositions to this proposal.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions? Thank you very much.
I think we're getting Joe Buck on. Okay, Joe, can you?
Hi, Commissioners. Good morning. Yes, can you hear me?
Please introduce yourself. Once you've done so, the time will begin.
Thank you. My name is Joe Buck. I serve as mayor of the city of Lake Oswego and also own several restaurants here as well. I'm grateful to the OLCC for their training programs and policies aimed at curbing underage and excessive drinking and creating a safer environment for our employees. Together with the OLCC, many hospitality establishments are working to envision a statewide culture of responsible alcohol consumption. Yet we all know that substance abuse disorder as a medical condition is not simply mitigated through best hospitality practices, right? As you're all aware, treatment for substance abuse is exceptionally difficult to access in Oregon, a fact especially true for low-income Oregonians who also experience higher rates of alcohol-related disease. The results of our last investment on addiction treatment front has created an immense cost for local jurisdictions, the healthcare system downstream, and the criminal justice system. In Lake Oswego, our calls for emergency services are up. And in my conversations with officers, they describe the vast number of calls that involve alcohol one way or another. I just came from a meeting of the metro area's Joint Transportation Policy Advisory Committee, where I represent the cities of Clackamas County. And at each meeting, we recognize the deaths of pedestrians and motorists who are killed on metro area streets. And as we look to invest in safer infrastructure for these high crash corridors, we also recognize that the leading cause of these deaths remains impaired driving. Oregon's substance abuse problem is a massive public safety problem. The amounts of funds that we're investing in training for new law enforcement officers and in safe pedestrian infrastructure must be met by investments in addiction recovery resources. I'm a third generation restaurateur, so I've long been around conversations of how investing in Oregonians through sick time, stronger minimum wage, transportation, paid family leave and such will reduce jobs and lead to closed businesses. Yet none of these fears ever materialize, and Oregon's hospitality industry has only continued to grow stronger. The pandemic did have a horrific impact on hospitality worldwide, but it also had a detrimental impact on the health of all Oregonians at a time when we were already at the bottom of investments nationwide in addiction recovery. The cause of the public health crisis should pay for the human care these crises demand. And in this case, what's being proposed is a very modest surcharge increase spread over many consumers to pay for desperately needed treatment. The loss of jobs and closing of businesses are hyperbolic arguments that simply do not square with the extremely modest level of what's being proposed. I recognize my perspective stands opposite of that of my industry advocates, but it's also important to recognize that Oregon's hospitality industry is not a monolith, and many of us feel differently than those of our lobbyists. I'm glad to see an OLCC that heavily weighs the costs and benefits of its decisions, especially in regards to fees imposed on retailers, industry, and the public. And in that analysis, please, commissioners, lean heavily on the critical importance of investing in mitigating the immense public costs alcohol has on nearly every Oregon family in every city and in every corner of the state. And please support the surcharge recommended in the governor's budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions?
Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Buck, could you comment on the last person who talked about the fact that there is, and we do know this to be the case, that beer and wine, which is also alcohol, does not have the same type of taxing or surcharges added to that? And can you speak to, why we wouldn't be making that equal, or it seems to me if your goal here is to reduce consumption, and if we raise spirits, people are going to either go to beer and wine, and they'll be using other products. When I'm asking these questions, Mr. Buck, because when we put policies into place that we know are going to negatively impact businesses, possibly cause job loss and things like that, I want to make sure that these policies are going to effectively do what we want to do.
I'm very sorry that I'm getting feedback here. I wasn't on for the last person to testify. I just came in when my name was called, but any amount of money that we're able to invest in addiction recovery is going to have a positive impact on the lives of Oregonians. And you're in a situation here where there's no, if the state, every time we go out and advocate before the legislature for some kind of a fee, some mechanism to pay for addiction recovery, we're met with the same arguments. And I just do not personally, as a restaurateur, I have absolutely no worry about the impact of a 50-cent additional surcharge on our bottom line. It just does not square with reality. It's just so minimal. If the state would also like to go and impose additional surcharges as they have, as advocates have on beer and wine, I support that as well. But this is the mechanism before us. I think it's a very fair way to spread the cost out very evenly over many consumers. And it's a responsible decision to make, I think, both for businesses and for the general public.
Commissioners?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Cam Worshuckle may not be. Okay. Chris Joseph.
So everyone has heard my spiel by now, so I'm not going to say it again.
I'll get to it.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, Executive Director. My name is Chris Joseph, and I'm one of the founders and owners of Cascade Spirits. I'm here today to express my concerns and opposition regarding the proposed tax increase on distilled spirits. As you are aware, the Oregon economy is struggling, and this new tax will be a blow for a lot of Oregon distilleries, as you've been hearing. Implementing such an increase would negatively impact our sales, force numerous layoffs, I can assure you that, and cause harm to the broader community that relies on small businesses like ours. A tax increase to our industry signals a massive disconnect on reality. Inflation has already made a significant impact on our industry, making it difficult for us to sustain. We were forced to raise our price in 2022 due to inflation. That led to a drastic decrease in our portfolio and our sales. That was for the first time ever that we saw a decrease. There is clear proof that our customers can't afford or are unwilling to pay an increase, no matter what others are saying right now. Small craft businesses like ours that make our industry special and unique simply cannot eat an additional tax increase right now. A bulk of our revenue from Cascade Spirits, along with other Oregon distilleries, are coming from the state of Oregon, meaning a tax increase is very detrimental and unsustainable. While the OLCC's mission is to support businesses and ensure public safety and community livability through education and liquor law enforcement, implementing this tax will fail 2 of the 3 of OLCC missions. By disincentivizing businesses from locating in Oregon, also by hiring Oregonians, and from selling Oregon equitably. This is a poverty tax that negatively impacts businesses. Oregon is already the 2nd highest liquor tax state in the country. As you've been hearing, it also has the 2nd highest addiction rate. We do have a problem. While I admire and respect the work that is being done to help addiction, and I do think it is very important, I am struggling to accept the connection between increased taxes and the reduced addiction rate. I'm willing to help support their cause, but not by increasing our taxes. We simply do not have the margin to give. It is a much more substantial rate of increase than a lot of people think. Some of our products, we only make $20 profit. You add $6 to that, that's a substantial part of our margin that is taken away that we need to employ to run our business and maintain and stay here. It is vital that you consider the impact this tax would have on small businesses. Please consider that. We do a lot for this state, and we want to continue to do so. Thank you for taking the time to hear my concerns today. And again, I do not approve of another tax increase. I hope you support small businesses as much as we support you. And I ask that you oppose this tax increase and stand by distilleries that make our industry special. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners. Thank you.
Eric Martin.
Hello, my name is Eric Martin. I am the owner of Aria Classic Dry Gin. We are a small craft distillery located in Portland, Oregon. I'd like to thank the commissioners for allowing me the time to comment in opposition to this 50-cent surcharge. I don't want to reiterate comments that my colleagues have provided in opposition. I just wanted to take the time to point out kind of the flawed argument that higher prices will somehow reduce consumption and make everything safe. For starts, I'm a 15-year veteran in this industry. I was around during the initial 50-cent surcharge, and I had a different business at that time. It was a different distillery operation. It was operating under the banner of Artisan Spirits. At the time, the surcharge in 2009 was put into place. Within about 6 months, I had to shut down Artisan Spirits because I, could no longer afford to compete with the large out-of-state, liquor interests. And here we are again, as mentioned previously, that's the original 50-cent surcharge has been that was temporary, has still remained in effect here 16 years later without sunset. Here I am, with my company, I've barely managed to weather the pandemic. Inflation has eroded our, ability to maintain any sort of ability to compete. And the only way we can compete against the large out-of-state, and foreign, liquor interest is, trying to compete on quality and price. And the only way I can do that is to purchase by volume. And, I'll say, when it comes down to pennies, it makes it sound pretty cheap. 3 cents, pretty cheap. That's, might seem cheap to the to the consumer, but when it comes to the the spirits producer, we have to pay for this in volume. And oftentimes we are the ones who have to eat the cost of the surcharge. Our industry had to do it back in 2009. Many of our, my old company and many of my colleagues at that time didn't make it. Integrity Spirits was one that faltered. Highball Distilling was another one that faltered. Cascade Peak was another that faltered. All of it can be pointed back to that surcharge. So the idea that it doesn't affect industry, that in and of itself is hyperbolic. And I wanted to point out, one of the previous commenters that's in support of this surcharge pointed out that he had no effect on his bottom line due to any kind of a tax increase. I want to thank you. Thank you for making our argument for us that higher prices will not reduce consumption. And I think that is at the heart of the issue. If you combine, the fact that the 50-cent surcharge, the idea that it's going to cause the consumer to say, nah, I'm not going to drink. That's not true. All that's going to happen is that the consumer is going to be driven down market to an arena that is dominated once again by large out-of-state and foreign spirit and liquor interests. So this 50-cent surcharge may seem effective in the short run, but in the long term, it's going to just eviscerate and permanently damage Oregon's craft beverage industry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair?
Yes.
Eric, I appreciate your comments, and you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head with 3 cents isn't cheap. It sounds like it, right? But for a lot of folks that don't understand the hospitality industry, for restaurants, for every buck that we take in, for every dollar that we take in, 90 cents goes back into our business. 90 cents goes back into the business. Those are thin margins. And I wish I had that 10 cents right now, but after, post-pandemic, the industry doesn't have that 10 cents. So we're looking at 5, 6 cents. So you take that 3 cents and it's a huge impact on our bottom line. And you hit the nail on the head. So I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
Commissioners? Thank you very much.
Adam Smith.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I am Adam Smith with the Distilled Spirits Council. Discus is opposed to an additional surcharge on spirits containers. The spirits industry in Oregon supports more than 19,000 jobs and $2 billion in economic activity. This surcharge would also directly impact the more than 75 Oregon distillers that support tourism, local agriculture, and state revenues. The distilled spirits industry is fully supportive of evidence-based solutions that help prevent alcohol abuse. But raising taxes is not one of those solutions. The price increase would harm responsible spirits consumers, businesses, and Oregon's workforce without addressing alcohol abuse. Now is not the time to impose higher fees on the Oregon hospitality industry, where employment is still down by over 11,000 jobs compared to the pre-pandemic levels. Raising taxes on beverage alcohol does not deter abusers from whose taxes are of little concern, but again penalizes responsible beverage alcohol consumers and hospitality businesses while eliminating tax revenues and jobs. Oregon restaurants and agency stores are projected to see a decline of nearly $40 million in revenue per year if this additional tax is approved, resulting in over 450 lost jobs. Consumers of distilled spirits should not have to bear such a heavy tax burden. I respectfully ask that you not approve an additional tax on consumers and businesses. Happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners? Thank you very much.
Bill Perry.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. For the record, Bill Perry, I'm with the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. My message is really going to be about instability. It's been touched on a little bit, but when you look about the restaurant industry as we're coming out post-pandemic, there's a couple of things that are adding to costs. First, labor costs are rising, and labor availability is still a struggle. So getting people to be able to get full staff so they can keep their establishments open to a full or increase their hours is difficult and does not look to be improving at the time period. Also, almost all the products coming in our back door, supplies, are either increasing in costs or struggling with availability as the supply chain continues to struggle. So that's one of the frustrations we have. The other thing, I think, as Commissioner Floyd and Miletus might be able to tell you, is, are we going into an economic recession? With inflation going up and people fears of their financial situation, usually the restaurant industry is the first one to feel that as it comes in. So as those two things are looming, are we looking at a time over the next couple of years where our businesses might start to drop? I mean, it's a fear, I think, that consumers and restaurant owners share. And so adding this cost to all those things is just one of the many things that's hitting us. I think sometimes it's felt like this is the only cost increase that might be looked at, but there's all these different factors that are affecting our business. And as brought up before earlier in one of the presenters, yesterday we found out that the state has potentially $2 billion more. The governor came out with, they wanted to add $280 million that into behavioral health. So with that coming into this year's budget, do we really need to be taking the chances of increasing these costs? And just from a personal note, the numbers have been thrown around about, costs versus addiction and where our addiction are, and I just think there's some fundamental flaws with the way we deal with addiction treatment in Oregon, and I really think those are kind of by raising costs, I don't think you're going to impact it by putting more money. To be honest, I don't think putting more money in a flawed system is going to fix it. So I think the addiction treatment needs to be looked at a separate conversation. But as of right now, like I said, there's many costs and many factors that are impacting our industry. And it would just be nice that we didn't have to deal with this additional cost factor coming into the next 2 years when we don't know what the economic outterm or the supply chain is going to look like for the industry. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners? Thank you very much.
Andrew Dyke.
Yes, hello, Commissioner, Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Good morning. I do have a couple of slides to share, which I will try to bring up quickly here.
Andrew, I can do that for you.
You can do, okay, great, thank you. And for the record, I'm Andrew Dyke. I'm a PhD trained economist. I work for, I'm a partner with Echo Northwest, a Portland-based economics and planning private consultancy. And I'm not here today to either support or oppose the policy under consideration, but I did want to provide the Commission with some information to help quantify some of the issues that we've heard earlier from both the mayor and from Dr. Namey, because I think in our line of work, obviously, data and research are critical, and we have a strong belief that it's very important to the extent possible to quantify the magnitude of all the potential costs and benefits of any particular policy change. And again, I am not here to support or oppose, but simply to provide information. And specifically, I want to talk just for a couple minutes about excessive alcohol use and the costs imposed on society. These costs are significant, and they extend far beyond simply treatment costs associated with alcohol use disorder. And many of these costs, as we'll see, are directly aligned and directly associated with OLCC's mission and mandate with respect to the public. And the information you'll see in the next couple of slides come from a study that we completed for the Oregon Health Authority a couple of years ago on that quantified the effects, the costs imposed by excessive alcohol consumption. And in that study, we concluded that as of 2019, those costs amounted to $4.8 billion. Next slide, please. This is a big number, and I think the size of these costs, the magnitude is not widely recognized. 2019, that was about the same size as the entire economy of Corvallis. Next slide. These costs of $4.8 billion spread across both the public and the private sector. There are significant lost earnings for workers associated with excessive alcohol consumption, lost revenue for businesses. I'll give you a little more detail in a second here. Majority of the costs that we quantified were imposed on the public. That is, all residents, all taxpayers in Oregon across a number of different departments, agencies, and systems. Next slide, please. And just to really dive in there, again, this $4.8 billion, it's a big number. It was in 2019 equivalent to $1,100 per person, or about 2% of the total state economy. These costs break down, as you see on the right. Big one, almost half of the total, labor productivity. This is because people show up to work impaired, because people don't show up to work because they're hungover, because they're in the hospital, because they're ill or injured as a direct or indirect result of excessive alcohol consumption. That's about $2 billion. Another $1.3 billion is associated with costs imposed on the criminal justice system and or associated with motor vehicle collisions. This is court costs, this is police enforcement. This is all the costs associated with motor vehicle crashes, whether they're fatal or just resulting injuries. In terms of the healthcare systems, excessive alcohol consumption imposes about $700 million as of 2019. Again, people get sick, they get injured, whether it's directly related to their own consumption of alcohol or because they are affected by individuals who consume too much alcohol themselves. Finally, the education and social welfare system, we see about $600 million in costs as of 2019 there. And for the last two categories, healthcare and education, a large share, a pretty good sized chunk of those sets of costs are associated with treating and providing services to individuals who have been diagnosed with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, the result of alcohol consumption during pregnancy. So large costs across a wide range of systems. Yep. And so main point, next final slide here, just repeats the first slide. Just want to encourage the commission to consider these costs and others in as quantitative a form as possible as they're considering the costs and benefits of the particular policy. Thank you.
Questions, commissioners?
So yeah, a lot of costs. So it's probably a good thing we're a control state, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, certainly large costs. Yep.
Commissioners? Question?
I actually am interested in the education piece once again.
Go ahead.
And you were stating that the, what is it, 605 mil goes towards the education, let's say things such as fetal alcohol syndrome. How much of that is preventive education, like knowledge to the general public, not just intervention after the damage is done?
Yeah, so it's not insignificant. It's also not a large share. I don't have the specific percentage of it. I can follow up after the fact if that's of interest. But there's some of those costs are related to prevention education services. I'd say that the special education costs on the health side are larger than the prevention dollars in that total.
I'm not really clear on that. I'm just not understanding. I just want to know what percentage is in the preventive column as with regards to substance abuse, alcohol specifically.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So specifically, the prevention and research associated with alcohol prevention, and et cetera, is about a little more than 10% of that $605 million. So about $75 million total.
Thank you.
Commissioners? Thank you very much.
Okay, next up,
Thank you.
Tony Morris.
Morning, Chair Raval, Commissioners, and Director Prinz. My name is Tony Morris, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director for Oregon Recovers. We're a movement of people in recovery from addiction focused on solving Oregon's addiction crisis. I'm also a person in long-term recovery, which for me means I've not had a drink in over 6 years. I urge you to vote in favor of the surcharge increase. House Bill 2976, which calls for the current temporary 50-cent surcharge to be made permanent on liquor made in Oregon, has advanced in the Oregon legislature. The Distillers Guild is a strong proponent of House Bill 2976, which will divert money away from the general fund to promote the consumption of alcohol, a toxic, addictive carcinogen with no public health benefits. Telling this commission that a temporary surcharge is harmful while asking the legislature to make another one permanent lacks candor. Last month, Oregon Distillers presented a litany of grievances regarding the proposed temporary 50-cent surcharge. Representatives of Freeland Spirits, Straightaway Cocktails, New Deal Distillery, Westward Whiskey, and the Oregon Distillers Guild all voiced opposition. Strikingly, all of them have submitted testimony in support of House Bill 2976. Their support for a permanent surcharge should cause this commission to question their claims of being adversely affected by a temporary one. The Oregon Distillers Guild legislative chair repeatedly emphasized the temporary nature of the existing surcharge in his argument against imposing the newly proposed one. But 5 days later, he asked the legislature to make the existing temporary surcharge permanent. These inconsistent positions call his opposition to the proposed surcharge into question. While the Oregon Distillers Guild praises the OLCC, they're pursuing legislation that will erode the regulatory powers. Last month, Oregon Distillers Guild leadership praised the agency, but House Bill 2976 takes power away from the OLCC. House Bill 2976 will permanently exempt liquor made in Oregon from all additional surcharges, including the one that is the subject of today's hearing. This commission should carefully question the statements of an organization that praises them to their face while attempting to weaken them behind their back. Voting in favor of the surcharge increase will restore public confidence in the OLCC. Claims that this new surcharge will lead to privatization are misplaced. The real risk of privatization is the public's ongoing loss of confidence in this agency. And if this commission prioritizes the demands of the Oregon boutique alcohol industry over the state's public health, it will only exacerbate this crisis of confidence. The proposed temporary surcharge will generate $45.2 million in revenue for the 23-25 biennium. Governor Kotek's budget identifies this revenue as funding to address Oregon's lethal addiction crisis. Alcohol is killing 6 Oregonians per day. Giving the governor the funding she needs to stop people from dying will show Oregonians that the OLCC is an important and necessary public health partner, and that will protect Oregon from privatization. Please vote yes on the surcharge. Thank you.
Commissioners, questions?
I have a question. Congratulations, though, first on the sorority. Yours. I'm just wondering, and I don't know the answer to this, but if that's accurate, what you said about the Oregon Distillers supporting HB 2976, do you know why they support it?
Chair Raval, Commissioner Guy Pong Porter, I cannot speak to their intentions of why they would want to make a permanent surcharge out of a temporary one that they all seem to dislike. I can tell you that the purpose of House Bill 2976 as written is to create the Oregon Distilled Spirits Board, which is a semi-independent state agency that, per estimates of a state economist in the the House Committee on Revenue last month, will divert roughly $5 million per biennium to pay for this board, whose purpose is to promote the consumption of alcohol manufactured in Oregon. Moreover, there is a provision in this bill that will prevent this commission from adding any additional surcharge. It is a radical stripping of an important state agency's regulatory power.
Commissioners?
Yeah, I don't think I mean, you made a good point again, but we're not deciding on the 50-cent surcharge at the legislature. So, I mean, do you think these surcharges are popular with the voters? Either way, 50 cents for the liquor, 50 cents for the addition. Do you think these are popular with the voters?
Chair Reval, Commissioner Miletus. That would be a speculative comment on my part. What I can tell you voters are paying attention to are the headlines that this agency continues to appear in.
You're right. So you think right now.
Commissioner.
But wait, here's.
I was not finished, Commissioner Miletus. Thank you. What I was saying is that voters are paying attention to scandal after scandal in the headlines. And if they are shown that this agency, again, is subservient to industry over the requirements of their public health obligations, that may give voters cause to rethink our control system.
Yeah, so no, you're right. We're at a very unpopular time for this agency. You guys sent us a video talking about how it's political suicide to raise alcohol taxes. I mean, you guys sent that to us. So we are not subservient to anybody. We are all independent thinkers, whether you believe that or not, you can. My concern is, and I still think that, there's a lot of good points that are brought up. The 50 cents, I don't know where we're going to land on it, but I think you need to understand that our mission is really trying to preserve a system that is under attack right now. And I think that when you need to realize what side we're on. And I think that, 50 cents for the thing, it could be good. But I just think that, there's not a clear cut answer. And I do worry. I think you need to think about whether the voters, because we can decide to make the 50 cent. Ultimately, I don't doubt that in November, there'll probably be a privatization. But I don't know that that's going to be popular with voters if we can run an extra 50 cents. I don't know that it's not. Hopefully you're fighting as passionately when privatization comes around as you are today. But that's just my thought on it.
Commissioner, I would add that I think voters care more about the 6 Oregonians that alcohol killed yesterday, will kill today, and kill tomorrow than they do about a 50-cent surcharge increase.
Let's hope you're right. Even the video you guys sent us kind of said otherwise. So
that is not what the video said.
Chair.
So,
go ahead. Well, I'm a little bit concerned, sir, about the way in which you come in here. We are trying to figure this out, and I think we can all agree in listening to everybody that there is a problem. How to solve that problem or what the right policy decision moving forward is a bit difficult. And so I hear anger in your voice that if we don't go one way, we are subservient in some way or doing the wrong thing. I am having trouble with you saying it's just 50 cents. Well, if it's just 50 cents, how is that going to solve this very large, very troubling problem that we're having in the state? Because again, it does seem like there is flawed reasoning. We have already very high prices as opposed to the rest of the country, but that is not leading to a decrease in our problem. So that is a concern for me, is saying, how can that increasing the prices, how is that going to lead to solving that problem or having an impact?
Chair Reval, Commissioner Curran, I would direct you to please review Governor Kotak's recommended budget, where she makes clear, and this number coincides with the number that appears in the public announcement that OLCC released regarding today's hearing. This increase is projected to generate $45.2 million in revenue for the 23-25 biennium. That is a lot of money that can pay for life-saving detox and treatment services. This would make a significant difference in addressing the state's lethal addiction crisis.
So,
So
go ahead.
I'll just say, I'm from Pendleton, Oregon, so I'm from a rural area. And right now, funding, I am just concerned about, yes, we can see the dollars, but how does that translate into getting more counselors, getting more people in the door to help those people? And I understand that there is some causal link to that, but I think that my concern is that that money does not automatically translate into people, especially people in rural communities, when I listen to my folks about actually getting those services.
Chair Revolve, I can't speak to how the legislature and ultimately the governor's office decides to allocate these funding dollars. But as a general proposition, I would argue that growing the size of the pie of the state's resources and allowing the process to work, we have a new governor who has made quite clear that behavioral health is a top priority of her administration. She will find an appropriate avenue in which to spend this new revenue.
Commissioners?
Chair?
Yes.
Thank you for your comments. I want to straighten something out here that I think is very important. And you mentioned that the mission of the OLCC is to promote the consumption of alcohol, and that is not our mission. Our number one priority is the safety of the public, and it is to control the consumption of alcohol. And a control state, we're able to do that. I hear what your concerns about that $45 million. There is no, as you pointed out, there's no guarantee that all of that or any of that will go to treatment, although the governor does want to see some of that addressed. But please be sure that we have number one priority is the safety of the public, and it is not the promotion of the sale of alcohol or the consumption of alcohol, but rather the control thereof.
Chair Revolve, Commissioner Doherty, thank you for your comments. To clarify, I did not say that the mission of this agency is to promote the sale of alcohol. What I testified about was the Distilled Spirits Board sought to be created by House Bill 2976. The purpose of that board is to promote the consumption of alcohol. I did not comment on the mission of this agency, save for its public health obligations.
Thank you for your clarification.
Thank you for the opportunity.
For the record, I need to let you know that we are not considering House Bill 2976.
Chair Revolve,
that's not going to come before us. And I sure, we have a lot of stakeholders who come to us and say, can you help us, give us some money through the legislature? And one of the things that I have to do, not our role to help you develop a income to run your administrative offices. So I understand your position about what was done on House Bill 2976, but for the record, that's not what's under considerations on that situation.
Chair Revolve, thank you for your comments. I understand entirely the scope of this hearing is the proposed additional 50-cent surcharge. I mentioned House Bill 2976 because supporters of that bill seem to be testifying at odds with how they're approaching this proposal that is at bar before this commission.
Which I think honestly makes sense because they are trying to trade. I'm going to speculate, this is total speculation, but that would take away our power to be able to keep doing these raises, and they're looking long term. So I mean, I appreciate you bringing that to us. I don't think it seems contradictory to us when you tell us what the whole bill is about, and what their long term thinking is. And that is the concern that we have as 6 people raising taxes for all Oregonians when the legislature can do those things and as a body of as an institution that can do that on its own. So.
I have a question for you from the industry. You may have heard me ask one of the other individuals who testified. Are there things that your organization can do to increase the number of providers that are out there? There's a shortage of providers, one, in the state of Oregon, and two, a number of private medical providers will not accept OHP or Medicare for services. Has your organization had any idea on how we could take a look at that to increase those numbers one way or another?
Chair Reval, thank you for your question. One goal of our organization and our legislative advocacy work is to support policy that expands access to treatments. Oregon, per the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, currently ranks 50th.
Yes.
In the nation.
Yes.
It is a high priority goal of our organization to improve that standing. And we do work with members of the legislature and other stakeholders to try to make progress towards that. And that is an ongoing effort of ours.
Commissioners? Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Dr. Marvin Pella.
Morning, Chair and Commissioners. I'm really happy to be here today, and I support this surcharge. I'm a physician, board certified in psychiatry and addiction medicine. I went to Mayo Medical School. I attended University of Minnesota, where I did my psychiatry training and my addiction fellowship. And I've worked for over 30 years in the field of addiction, initially doing primary care for people with both addiction and psychiatric illness, but over the last 20 years as Chief Medical Officer of the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation, the largest nonprofit addiction provider in the country. And I was responsible for their national clinical care. I've done research on substance use disorders. I've written books on it. And I'm also in recovery from addiction, having dropped out of high school and gone to treatment at age 17 and been sober since 19, resulting in 47 years. My first clinical rotation at Mayo Medical School was on the surgical rotation. And the first patient I ever did a history and physical exam on was in DT. He was there for a elective surgery from the East Coast, and he was hallucinating and didn't know what was going on. So my first initial impression of alcohol in a medical setting was that it's toxic. And now we know that's the case. It is toxic to human beings. There's hundreds of alcohols that exist. Only ethyl alcohol can be consumed by human beings without it killing them. It just does it slowly. And it is toxic. It's a major cause of strokes and dementia. A 50-year-old woman I knew had pancreatitis. And pancreatitis is one of the most painful things a human can experience. It's caused by extreme alcohol use, and that's why she had it. Unfortunately, it resulted in pancreatic cancer as well. Alcohol is a carcinogen. It causes cancer in almost every body organ, but primarily those it touches in the mouth, the larynx, the pharynx, throughout the GI tract, the rectum, and elsewhere. It's also a major cause of breast cancer in women. So it's a carcinogen as well. It also causes addiction, which we've heard a great deal about, and we know a lot about. However, a friend of mine texted me last week about a fellow fraternity member at University of Oregon back in the 80s who just died after decades of alcoholism. An alcohol use disorder of a very severe nature, living on the streets of downtown Portland. This was a bright young man, and his life deteriorated since college, actually. Alcohol is addictive and it kills. Distilled spirits have high levels of alcohol. That's why people like them, actually. It isn't the taste in general. And high concentration drugs and alcohol are the ones used the most because they cause the biggest effect. You have the means to help control alcohol in this state and help reduce alcohol use and reduce these deaths and these medical problems. And I truly appreciate that and hope for your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioners.
I-
Doctor.
Dr. Cephala, did I say that?
Yes.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for your demeanor. Your demeanor really makes it easier to hear and listen to your words and your knowledge.
Thank you.
Really. And congratulations on your sobriety. And really, I wish that you could have continued talking because I really liked what you were saying.
See how they treat me?
I really didn't have a question. I just want to make that comment. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I do a lot of speaking in regard to addiction. It's hard to withhold my comments to 3 minutes. I gotta tell you that.
Commissioners?
Chair?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comments and congratulations. Is it 47 years now, sobriety?
Yes.
Yes, well, I'll have 40 in June, so I'm a little bit behind you, but I'm working at it.
Fantastic.
Can you tell me just if you know this, and I'm not up with the latest data, but what is the percentage of the population that we're addressing here?
In general, the discussion's around 10 to 12%, but it's hard to measure actually.
Yeah, I understand that. I've tried it before. And I do want to support you in your comment that controlling access to alcohol is one of the ways to at least help with the problem. There's probably 27 different avenues to address this problem. And I would say that controlling access to alcohol and increasing access to treatment and to facilities would be the two. Would you agree with that?
I would. There are certainly a lot of means that are necessary to be taken, especially in this state, which has such poor access, and yet that's a necessary piece.
Right. Yeah, part of our mission is to actually control the access to the alcohol, and hopefully we'll find some solutions to increasing the usage of the facilities we have or increasing the number of facilities. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Commissioners, other questions?
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Tony Vazina?
Laura, is Jennifer still connected?
Yes. I think she can hear us. She's just on mute and frozen.
Oh, am I frozen?
Yeah, okay, we got you.
Well, we
Thank
can
you.
hear you.
Okay.
Don't turn into a cat. I think we'll be all right. Hey, how's it going? I heard the spiel. My name's Tony Vesna. I'm the executive director of 4D Recovery. We provide recovery support services to adolescents and young adults. I have about 100 employees. We serve hundreds of young people in the Tri-Counties area. We've been able to expand under Measure 110 funds. I'm also the chair of the Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission. I do not represent the commission here today, but I will say that what we're talking about aligns with our strategic plan. I understand that you guys, and I'm just going off the cuff a little bit. I understand that you guys are in a tough position, right? On the one hand, you have people asking you to keep the industry going, and help preserve an economic means for a lot of people. But on the other hand, we have a crisis in Oregon where a lot of people are being harmed by alcohol and other drugs. And alcohol is the biggest contributor. And I believe that due to your public service orientation, I would ask that you consider the net benefit of your decisions on public health in Oregonians. We lost 8 people this weekend, not related to alcohol, but to other drugs. Our current capacity to serve people in Oregon, when we look at the infrastructure for prevention, treatment, and recovery services, is 49% under what we need to serve people. We are in a crisis, and it's incredibly difficult to expand services. Chair, you asked about expanding treatment services under Medicaid. One of the difficult problems we have with expanding an industry is that if you have reimbursable services, those are going to pay for the services that you provide that day, and they're going to cover your operations costs, right? They're not going to cover expansion costs. funds like this that would go into the general fund, which I understand wouldn't be 100% allocated towards expanding treatment services. But those type of unrestricted funds can be used to incentivize programs like 4D, like treatment providers, detox residential, to go after capital funds to do some of the brick and mortar work that needs to be done to expand service capacity. And I know that you can't say if we do the surcharge, it's going to translate into treatment services, right? But I think what you can look at is that the governor has made an explicit commitment to this. It's in her budget. The legislature, for the most part, is friendly to recovery services. And then you have a lot of recovery advocates, organizations that have mobilized to increase the access to treatment. And public opinion has shifted where people want treatment. They believe people can and do recover. And so I'd ask you that you weigh those decisions and make whatever decision would be in the best net benefit to the health and care of Oregonians.
Thank you. Commissioners.
Oh, and I've been in recovery. I got 12 years. I ain't like the other big dogs in here, but I'm coming up on them. I'm coming up. You know, I've been sober almost 12.
Thank you.
Hey, Chair.
Yes.
I got a quick question, and I appreciate your energy. I appreciate your presentation. And you're right, Oregon is in a crisis, and Oregon has a very complex public behavioral health issues. And Oregon also, we rank #1 for addiction to, as you probably know, to methamphetamines and opioids. I mean, that's a major crisis. So how are we to be certain that an increased tax on alcohol is going to address some of those behavioral health concerns, right? Especially as it intersects, and we have a huge issue with the meth and the opioids. It is complex.
No, that's a great question. And, you know, I just want to be clear, I'm not an epidemiologist, and so I can't speak on some of the prevalence. But what I can say is that in general terms, we see more alcohol use than other drugs combined. We see more of a negative impact from alcohol use than the collective other drugs combined. But with funding that we could leverage from the surcharge, it could be used to provide services that are more comprehensive, that would not only address people who are using alcohol, but those other drugs as well. And what we see is polysubstance use. So people are using a lot of substances. I had some of my staff run some numbers for me last night because I was just interested to know kind of drug use trends for some of our people at 4D. And I think we looked at like 250 people or something over the last year, participants of our program. And 51% stated that alcohol was one of their 4 top drugs of use out of 13 different drugs. So it's still like highly prevalent, right? But most of them are using multiple drugs at the same time.
Yeah.
If that answers
Yeah,
your
that,
question. Okay, yeah.
yeah, precisely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioners.
Chair,
Yes.
do you find it problematic that the proposal is only to raise spirits rather than I mean, there's no proposal to raise beer and wine, which is another kind of alcohol, and oftentimes what people will shift to when there is a raise in prices on one and not a raise on the other.
That is it. I thought about it, so I don't want to, eat up all my time. So we're a control state. I'm not an expert in this, but it sounds like for this commission, you guys have the opportunity to address this issue, right? I do think it's problematic, but I think what separates you from the remainder of the alcohol industry is they have incredibly powerful lobbyists, and we've tried to pass an alcohol tax on those other alcohols several times, and we've gotten beaten every single time. So I do think it's problematic. And if there's anything you can do to help, I don't see how you could, but if there is, like, we would appreciate helps in our efforts because we keep getting beat.
To that point, we are told that we have a lot of power, and then we find out we don't. Yes. Commissioners?
Chair, just one more follow-up question. So one of your first statements was that it's your strategic plan is to see a raise in prices. I'm curious because we've listened to a lot of recovery and counselors today say that they're in favor of this. Is there an amount that you would say we don't want to to, is there an amount that would satisfy you? How far up do you want to see the prices increase? And have you done any research on what would be that, I guess, point in which you would see the best results?
Yeah, no, that's I just want to clarify that the outcomes that we're intending to achieve through something like this would be in alignment with the strategic plan, with reducing consumption and increasing access to treatment services. I'm not qualified enough to answer the second part of your question. I think you would have to talk to the experts, maybe some of the people you had here earlier, around which price points meet what, when do we stop doing it, what, you know, those kind of things, because I don't have the knowledge for that.
Fair enough.
We appreciate the knowledge you do have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Robin Springer.
Morning. My name is Robin Springer, and I'm pleased to be here today to be able to address you. So I'm a former DA here in Multnomah County. I was the DUI deputy at one point, so I issued DUI cases, and I think I may have followed Executive Director Prinz in that role. So he trained me, which is
Don't start with that.
which is a little ironic. So, but the point of this is that in my role in that position, I was able to see what happens when people are arrested for alcohol-related offenses. I prosecuted many DUI cases, and alcohol was a problem then, and unfortunately, it's still a problem now. In my role in the DA's office, I also represented the state of Oregon in child dependency cases. So that's a situation where kids are taken away from parents who are unable to care for them. They're put into foster care, and then a plan is made to try to reunite parents and families. And that's where I really saw the effects of alcohol and drugs and mental health. And usually it's a trifecta. It's not just one. It's not just drugs, just alcohol, or just mental health. They all kind of go together. And so seeing that perspective of how kids in our society are impacted by parents who are unable to show up and be present, that really impacted me. And I was a DA from 1998 until 2006. So the fact that this is, 20 something years later, and I still remember it. I still remember a lot of those hearings and how heartbreaking it was seeing how kids are impacted. And at the time I had 2 young kids at home. Now they're adults. It's just, you see the impact that alcohol has on our society and on the criminal justice system, right? So I saw a statistic recently that talked about driving deaths related to alcohol in Oregon. And back in 2010, there were 70 deaths that were related to alcohol use. In 2020, there were 191. So the problem is still there, and I would argue that it's even worse. And this is related to alcohol. We have a problem with alcohol addiction, obviously, in the state, and we do need more treatment beds. And I will just briefly echo what has been said by other proponents here today for the additional 50-cent surcharge tax or surcharge. And the reason that I support it is believing that that money will go to help fund addiction treatment services, because I do feel like those are drastically, just really needed here in the state of Oregon right now. We don't have enough treatment services. We don't have enough treatment providers, and we obviously have a lot of people in our society that need help. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate your taking on this issue.
Thank you. Commissioners. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Emerson Hamlin. Okay. We could go to Lizzie Atwood Wills. She's on.
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me today. My name is Lizzie Atwood Wills. I'm the project coordinator for the Oregon Alcohol Policy Alliance. We're a coalition of treatment providers, program administrators, behavioral health leaders, public agencies, preventionists, public health advocates, community organizations, individuals in recovery, and family members impacted by alcohol use. Together, we advocate for evidence-based policy to prevent alcohol-related harms and improve equitable community health outcomes in Oregon. On behalf of the Oregon Alcohol Policy Alliance, I'd like to share our support for the 50-cent increase in the distiller surcharge. Studies from well-respected research institutions, as you've heard today, including the World Health Organization, the Center for Disease Control, consistently show that pricing alcohol is the most effective tool for prevention, that consumption is responsive to price, and increases in alcohol prices are associated with decreases in both excessive alcohol consumption and related harms among adults. We've also seen this demonstrated with other addictive products like tobacco, and as a country and a state, we've been able to successfully curb tobacco usage by increasing the price of tobacco products. Excessive alcohol use is also associated with social and public health harms, including increased crime, reduced economic activity, and rising healthcare costs. In Oregon alone, as you've heard today, the Echo Northwest report showed that alcohol consumption costs the state of Oregon $4.8 billion per year, with over $2 billion of that cost being in lost earnings for businesses and employees due to excessive alcohol use. Oregon is facing an alcohol addiction crisis. A distiller surcharge is a clear way to begin to work towards better outcomes for our state. An increase in the surcharge will first reduce consumption, especially among excessive users. We know that prevention is one of the most affordable and meaningful ways to solve healthcare crises. Second, the increased surcharge will generate $45 million in biennial revenue. And not only would this $45 million, as proposed by the governor, be well used on our state's behavioral health crisis, including for more addiction and treatment recovery services, the state could also better use recouped funds that are currently being spent on responding to the negative outcomes from alcohol use as a result of lower addiction rates and decreased excessive alcohol use. The choice for the OLCC Commission is clear, and we hope that you'll support the opportunity for the use of an evidence-based solution to improve prevention, cost savings, and increase state revenues. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Great, Commissioner.
Chair?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me, thank you for your presentation. And if this money came in, say you had $20 million, where would you think would be the most effective way to spend that money?
Thank you for your question, Commissioner. I think that there are a multitude of ways, and it also depends on who you ask, even in the behavioral health community, because there are layers of challenges that Oregon is facing as it relates to behavioral health. One of them is for increasing providers and increasing provider wages. That's been a big issue for maintaining the overall behavioral health system. Another option that I think is really important to highlight is specific addiction and recovery treatment services, and particularly culturally relevant treatment and recovery services, which are extremely limited in Oregon. And we know that communities of color and other marginalized communities experience the impacts of alcohol harms at a higher rate. I'd be remiss to not say this. Prevention is a key tool in decreasing the overall negative outcomes of future addiction challenges. And so if we could use $20 million to continue to increase primary prevention, that would be money well spent.
Thank you. We keep coming into this issue that we're the highest price, highest taxed in the country, but yet we still have this problem, and it's not being addressed, which might say to me that maybe the money we have is not being as effectively used as we should. In other words, throwing more money at it may not be the answer. I don't know. It's a question that's more of an observation. We keep stumbling on this, that we have the highest taxes, and I think we need to get input from the industry on how more effectively to use the dollars that we have.
Yeah, I would argue that we, I'm sorry, Chair, if you don't, I'm happy to respond.
Go ahead.
Okay, I would call out that the highest tax argument is an interesting one from my position, knowing that Oregon actually has the lowest national alcohol taxes. It's that we have high-priced locally manufactured products. And that's the sort of difference in opinions, I guess, is what we could call that, about how the pricing process actually works. Ideally, yes, all the stakeholders are at the table to make a decision about how the funds could be best well spent. The legislature is having robust conversations about how to better spend those behavioral health dollars, and I think it's not a problem that you solve overnight.
Commissioners?
I just wanted to comment that we did ask for that data, and we were provided that data, that it's not just that we have higher priced items, it's that our priced items that are available in all states, which were provided the data, and I can't pull it up right now, but I did review it. I asked to be provided that because I did ask one of our presenters last week for actual data. So it is the data out there. It confirms that we do have higher price. The same product in our state is more than it is in 49 other states overall as an average.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dennis, I think is.
Dennis?
Yeah, but we're the lowest tax state?
That's correct, excise tax. Which I'm happy to share a chart with you to demonstrate the excise taxes on alcohol, which shows that Oregon is the lowest.
It's a long talk. She doesn't understand it. We'll talk about it later.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Laura?
That was the last person. So I think we're on to the update from the Oregon Distillers Guild.
So two things. One, first off, we're gonna take a break before I'm old. But one of the things that I would like everyone who's either listening or who's present today, first off, thank you for being involved. I think if you take a look at the men and women who are on this commission and their backgrounds, both who have very serious effects of alcohol in their lives, from the medical side to the industry side, in listening to all of your testimony, particularly the one that you were taking, where they were taking children away from their parents. I took kids away from their parents. My first week on the job was a motor vehicle accident, driving under the influence. And while I'm giving them CPR, I didn't know that he'd pulled a major vessel from the back of his heart from the impact of the vehicle. He was dead. I'm brand new. So over the years, not only did I see what alcohol did for people or did to people, but also every other addictive item that somehow is now in our laps to manage, and what it does in Oregon and the rest of the country. We are taking this very seriously. We are not trying to convince one another as to what to do. We're going to continue this process because it is very important. We are a very abusive state. And I don't care how you want to look at it. So as we move forward, your comments will be well received and respected. I just want to let you know that. And yes, I am very glad I'm not a cop anymore. Director.
Mr. Chair, I was going to see after the break if we could flip to the new building update, just because I've got a couple folks from DAS. I want to make sure that they're.
Okay, so it is 17 minutes before 11. At 12 minutes before 11, we're going to be back in this room. Run fast.
Okay.
Good afternoon or good morning still. We're back in session. So, Director?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we move to the new building update?
Absolutely.
Okay, and I want to do that and invite Jeff up, but also want to invite the Administrative Services Director, Shannon Ryan, come on up, please, and Jeremy Miller, the Deputy Administrator at the Enterprise Asset Management. So we want to just get all of our partners up here. Mr. Chair, one of the speakers this morning alluded to, we've been moving through a crisis. And whenever you move through a crisis, a lot of times it makes you feel like you're doing it alone, right? All of us can feel like, whoa, we're all doing this alone, but we're not. And I just wanted to make sure, as we talk about the warehouse that is so critical to our control system, that I introduce you all to the folks that are going to move through this with us. It's a vital partnership. And, I think it's important some of our staff are on too, either virtually or in the room. But one of the main things I get asked by our staff is, are we still doing this? Are we still doing this project? And so I can assure everyone, yes, we are, and we've focused a lot on who isn't here with us, because I think our director, the former director, was a big part of planning for the move of the warehouse. The distilled spirits director is, no longer with the OLCC, is a big part of it. The CIO, who's no longer with us, is a big part of it. And sometimes we focus on who's not here with us providing leadership. But I want to introduce just vital partners that will be doing this work with us. I want to thank Jeff, who kind of being pointed the spear of the OLCC employees who are working with the Department of Administrative Services and DOJ on this. I want to thank Scott Emery, vital partner. Scott has stepped in basically as our CIO from the enterprise. We're a big state government. We have a lot of partnerships, and some of those we rely on without bringing them up, so you all can meet the folks that we're going to meet these crises and meet these challenges with together. So I want to introduce Shannon and Jeremy, and Jeff. So Shannon, maybe you can take it and just introduce yourself and Jeremy a little bit, and then we can do a check-in on where we are on the warehouse project. So thank you for coming too. Appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Raval and Commissioners. I am Shannon Ryan, and I am the administrator for the Enterprise Asset Management Division with the Department of Administrative Services. So pretty sure it's the longest title ever. And with me is my colleague, Jeremy Miller. He is the capital planner for DAS and also our division's deputy director. So again, thank you for having us. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet you all and interface and let you know how excited we are to, honestly excited to partner with OLCC to get this project, complete to fruition. It's obviously extremely important for OLCC for all the reasons that we've talked about and you will continue to talk about. But I want to let you know from the state's perspective, from the government's perspective, the enterprise perspective, it's hugely important to the entirety of the enterprise. So we're all completely dedicated to helping in any way we possibly can and share our expertise in any way we possibly can. Just so you know, our division is in charge of all capital finance and capital construction for the state. So hopefully we can bring some value to the team.
One of the things I'd asked Shannon, as I'm new to this is, Jeff has helped me understand, yes, the warehouse, the physical warehouse is important, but the conveyor belts that we use to get the spirits in and out to our agents, incredibly important as well. And then the interface with the IT system so that we have connection to the points of sale are critical too. And I asked Shannon yesterday, said, Shannon, are you gonna help us with all of that? So Shannon, can you share your response with the commission, please?
Yeah, and I demurred on that, that intro. I said, right, I'll just show up and say, hey, I'm from DAS, I'm here to help.
Always greeted with a bit of a chuckle, usually when you say
It's like
that.
saying I'm from the government and I'm here to know that irony and all that. So you can see why I demurred on that intro.
You know, and then a lot of the time, again, has been spent working with Colin in the legislature, with Rosie in the legislature, as you know, looking backward. And it's right to look backwards when there's an issue that comes up. Really pleased that we've done that look backward. We have our resources ready to go and move forward. And so Jeff has a timeline. He's going to kind of tell us where we are right now. But the basics of the timeline, you know, we're looking at groundbreaking just under a year from now. It's about March, April of 2024. We're looking at having a completion date right around July 2025, right? Kind of at the end of this biennium and the beginning of next biennium. And to keep a project on track like this, it's not something one person can do alone. It's not something any of us could do alone. Anytime you're leading through a large project, you need to do it with others. And so I just wanted to make sure I introduced Shannon and Jeremy as critical to that work. And then Jeff, if you can give us a, you know, to drill down to the detail, where are we?
Before that happens, can yeah, he's on a roll.
I am. I've had my second cup of McDonald's coffee.
So can you explain to us, because some, you know, some of us are new, some of us aren't. Who is DAS and what do you do? And how can you help us?
Oh, that is a really.
And I'm also from the government. I'm here to help.
Okay, so thank you for the question. The Department of Administrative Services is kind of the it's the overarching agency. So it's two things. It's policy vehicle for the executive branch. So policy from the legislative direction and obviously the governor's direction. Our agency works very closely with the governor and basically governing her agencies, right? On the policy level, as well as we offer services. So back of the house services, think of HR and risk and payroll and all of those kind of centralized services. That is DAS. And is also the state's chief financial office, the state's chief operating office, and the state's chief human resource office. So that all kind of funnels up to DAS. And the theory is that we do our jobs really well to free up the agencies to carry out their specific missions. Does that make sense? If you're familiar with the federal construct, we would be the General Services Administration for the feds.
Thank you.
Only on a super small level.
Commissioners?
And I was on a roll.
I know.
Before my caffeine fades out, just one more question. Can you give the commission an idea of some of the projects that you've been working on recently to give idea of kind of the experience that you'll bring to this kind of project?
Sure. I'm going to let Jeremy speak to those specifics. But just so you know, I am originally from the real estate development industry before I came to public service. So public service is my second stint. So I've been around it my adult life, and as has Jeremy, he from the industry as well. But Jeremy, why don't you go and speak to our recent large project?
Let's speak to the two current large projects that I think are really be able to bring our perspective and the things that we can add to a project like this. And I think it's a great partnership, and I'm quite excited about it. So currently in Wilsonville, we have the North Valley Complex. What we're doing is we're integrating multiple agencies into one building that have commonalities within lab spaces. It's about a $95 million construction project. So it's very large, it's very robust. It's a CMGC, same type of trajectory that this particular project has been going on. Lessons learned coming forward to this project are gonna be just fantastic. We also are undergoing a about $50 million tenant improvement at the executive building in Salem. Where the DAS executive staff work from, DAS CHRO, as well as our technology they work that's moving out now. But that is a building that we're taking down to the concrete, all new innovative technologies, software systems, new HVAC, all the things that integrate well into this project, because we recognize that you need a conveyor, but you also need that software. So that's a whole separate procurement. And so you actually got to start them in parallel as opposed to build it and then the software will come. That won't work. So that we do every day. We do everything from $1 million project up to $95 million project, or we could be tapped from another agency to build a brand new facility somewhere throughout the state. So that's part of our mission, is to help support and guide other agencies and partner and deliver projects.
Commissioners? Thank you.
Questions?
Go ahead.
Not too many to ask.
Later.
Later.
Chair Reval, Commissioners, Director Prince. For the record, my name is Jeff Samuels, Administrative Services Division Director. And I just want to echo what's been said. DAS all along has been helping us through this project, and they're, so great to have them continue with us on this project. So they've helped us, real estate services, to purchase the property, procuring the contractor, DAS procurement is assisting us with that. So right now, I told you before that we're working with to finalize that contract with the CMGC. So that's the construction manager's general contractor. It's being reviewed this week. It should be finalized with DOJ. Then it'll go back to DAS procurement for final fixes of the agreement itself, the contract. And then it'll go back to J.E. Dunn for them to look at and to approve. So hopefully that'll get done. I don't know the exact time frame, but within the next couple of weeks. We're going to be a little bit behind schedule. We had hoped that this would have been done, that we could have procured this contract to signing by the first part of May. But there was a protest, of the intent to award. And so we had to work through that. So that gave us a slowdown. But anyway, just know that DOJ does have it. They're reviewing what J.E. Dunn had proposed as some changes to the contract. And so hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So that's one piece of it. That'll be we need their help, obviously, to do the project, but also to validate some of the things that we've already done through schematic design. Another piece in parallel that's going on is land use with the city of Canby, about how we're going to do our building and traffic studies and things like that. We just had a neighborhood meeting the end of April, on April 25th. So that's with the nearby neighbors to our property, to hear any concerns that they might have. It went well. However, they do, our property is bordered on two sides by First and Walnut. And on First Street, it's currently not very wide. We're going to be improving that with half street improvements. But we did hear from them that, our partner that has trucks, they don't want to see our vehicles either with construction or when we actually get on site and start having deliveries and shipments from our warehouse on First Street. And so they made a request of us, is it possible that when you come off 99 that you go by Fred Meyer's on Sequoia Parkway, which is a good sized street that can handle truck traffic, and then go down to Walnut and then come back north on Walnut to our property. We can accommodate that. So we'll do that and work with the contractors on that once we have them on board. So that was good. And then another concern the neighbors had was just that First and Walnut where our property is. It's a T intersection, as you might have remembered. And the city is going to punch that through Walnut 299 E. And then that'll create a good avenue for trucks to come in. It is. Now we have a traffic study, and part of our land use and application is our impacts to the surrounding intersections. And there are impacts, but we're mitigating that. There'll be some fees that we have to pay. But the city had already done it prior to us purchasing the land. They had already proposed and we're working towards. So we reached out to them. our owners, consultants, our project management firm, Cumming Group, reached out to the city. And that is proposed, projected to be finalized, that street improvement. It basically the end of 2024 or first quarter of 25. So hopefully before we actually move into the building, which will be a benefit to us. So, and then on to just where we're at. So we did schematic design. We have a design of what the architect worked with us on our assumptions at the time for what size of a warehouse and what size of a headquarters we needed on the property. And I think you remember we talked about 400,000 square foot warehouse and currently a 35,000 square foot headquarters. But we could, we've really been doing our due diligence and making sure that we're making the right assumptions. And we believe that we can reduce the warehouse size from 400 down. To back up, they also provided us cost estimates, the architects and the team, of what the proposed schematic design would cost. It's over our budget. And so we're going to value engineer and we're going to be on budget, our budget being 145 million total. And so that gets us to what ways could we do that? One is we can reduce the warehouse size down to near 350,000. We'll still do some validating with the contractor when they come on board. But we think that'll still give us our goal for 15 to 20 years without having to do any improvements to the building. And then as far as for the headquarters, we had assumptions going into the headquarters about our person count that's going to actually go there and be in office. And we through COVID, we started hybrid work. The state and the state agencies did hybrid work. We currently have a good contingent of folks in our agency that work hybrid. If you walk around our building, sometimes it's pretty light in our building here. And so we did a study for 2 weeks recently to figure out how many people are actually in building. And we're going to use that and work with our partners to validate the size and how many offices we need, cubicles and drop-in stations for those folks that are going to come to the office every once in a while that work hybrid, so that we don't overbuild our headquarters. That will also create value engineering and get our budget down to the 145 million.
So do we know just yet, if is it gonna probably not stay at that 35,000 headquarters? It's gonna be reduced a little bit.
Yeah, the schematic, Commissioner Floyd, was done pre-COVID for the headquarters. So, I mean, who knew we could all successfully do this, work successfully in the hybrid model. So that is a really good opportunity. And so that's why we wanted to do the survey. We want to have all those options ready so that when we get to having a general contractor and we've got everyone in place, we know what levers we have to pull to keep us on track. And, the only other project of this magnitude I've been involved in was when DPSST, the police academy, moved from being on a university to having its own campus over in Almsville. This is always part of the process, is taking what the architect has rendered and making sure it fits within your wallet. So probably the same as home improvements too, just on a different scale.
And if I may, commissioners, one other thing, and Jeremy touched on it as well, is obviously you're aware we have the distilled spirits supply chain, the IT portion of the warehouse. It's going to make it work. And we need to make sure that those two projects align, our IT project and our warehouse, so that it operates when we finalize it. And so we may have to adjust our timelines a little bit, and we're working towards that so that they end at the same time.
As you know, that Charlotte will be going to NAPCA this weekend. And it's important to understand that the industry is extremely interested on where we are with the warehouse. And by interested, they want to be assured that we stay on track, because it helps them determine, are they going to meet their goals and objectives, which are different than our goals and objectives. And as long as we stay on track, they've made a commitment to stay partners with us. Period. So it's important that we stay on contract and we stay on mission. So when we're meeting with them, I want to thank Laura for helping schedule us pretty much back to back to back in meetings with the industry so they understand where we are. But thank you very much for your help. It's going to be very important when we meet with our partners.
And to follow up, Mr. Chair, that, we're not the only state I've learned modernizing a warehouse. I think, 50s or 60s, Jeff, with the different warehouses here. I always forget which state is the best one to start from, but there's several states, control states. Virginia just completed their warehouse. I think there's a lot of opportunity for learning through our association with Virginia. And Mississippi is behind us in modernizing their warehouse system, where they are purchasing the land that you all did in 2021, finalizing those things. And so part of the association is there's actually a business meeting on the calendar next week that they can share what they've learned about modernizing your warehouse. So we can learn from other states in our association. And I'm excited to do that. Let's learn from other people's lessons and avoid as many pitfalls as we can as we move forward.
So is Jeff and Dennis going to be a part of that meeting?
Miss Ryan's going to be a part of the meeting.
I'll be there.
No, just
Jeff's not.
Yes. Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, I think we're ready for the update from the Oregon Distillers deal.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello there. Thank you for waiting.
No problem. Yeah, my pleasure.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Kelly Woodcock. I am with Westward Whiskey, but I also am the co-legislative chair for the Oregon Distillers Guild. Thank you guys for giving me some time to chat. Am I on 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. I made a speech that was just a couple minutes longer. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little update on the landscape of what the Oregon distillers industry looks like. We have about 100 active distilleries right now, which is up from about just 14 in 2009. While 100 feels like a huge amount of growth, that's nothing compared to the wine industry and that industry. Well, there are a few distilleries in this state that are considered to be large in terms of craft distilling. The vast majority of us are producing less than 5,000 cases a year. According to Discus, distilleries generate about $2 billion in economic activity and about 1.2 million in trade exports. In 2022, Oregon collected about 28.5 million in markup and 2.5 million in surcharge on Oregon spirits alone. As a group, we make up about 30 different types of Oregon craft distilleries make a premium product in general. The average price point for national brands sold in Oregon is around $15 a bottle. By contrast, Oregon brands have an average price point of $30 a bottle. Oregon distillers make craft products, meaning they produce premium spirits at high prices and costs, and therefore sell them for higher prices. Only 8% of the spirits consumed in Oregon are made in Oregon. We see that as a real opportunity for Oregon-made products. The distilled spirits industry in Oregon currently supports approximately 19,000 jobs, from agriculture production to value-added manufacturing and transportation to my own tasting room staff and hospitality workers. Well, that's a lot of jobs in this state. I think it's important to point out that most craft distilleries in the state have only 1 to 5 employees. Well, there are some larger, Westward, my own being one of them, with about 50 jobs here in Oregon. We are the rare exception. The average distillery employee gets $2 more an hour than the same job or comparable job in breweries. I've seen firsthand that those distillery jobs are creating opportunities for their staff to become first-time home buyers. I'm one of them. And I point this out because we strongly believe that not only is our industry creating jobs, but they are great jobs. And as we continue to support the industry, not only do we expect to create more distillery jobs, we know job growth in transportation, agriculture, hospitality will all also grow. One of the biggest ways the distilling industry impacts the state is through our agricultural purchases. As an industry, we purchase wheat, rye, barley, potatoes, blueberries, strawberries, marionberries, huckleberries, cranberries, cherries, apples, pear, peaches, walnut, ginger, and that's just to name a few. Just at Western alone, we purchased 2 million pounds of malted barley last year, all produced in the Northwest. We are proud to support the farmers in our community and know the strong ties to the agricultural community not only creates outstanding products, but it helps support Brand Oregon. Things like access to distribution and experts are key for our industry to be successful and to grow. In my own case, we have seen that the ability to sell outside of our home state and abroad has directly led to the hiring of additional barrel warehousing employees, more distillers, more sales team jobs, and most recently, the purchase of a new thermal tank that employed a concrete crew, welders, and installation contractors, and will lead to the increased capacity for us, meaning more jobs. I wanted to just update you on that HB 2976, despite it not coming before you guys. I just wanted to correct some things I heard. I think the gentleman at the Oregon Recoverers Group was just a little behind on what's currently happening on that. The economic impact is now $2 million. I believe that's in that 2-year period. And it isn't permanent. If the funding goes away because the temporary surcharge is removed, we'll have the ability with our own resources to support the board, but we would have to change the funding mechanism. The Oregon distilled spirits industry is at a pivotal moment. We know there is demand for our products outside of the state, as supported by the data from the American Craft Spirits Association. But most of us are very small, and many distillers who are also work full-time jobs. I know we heard that from the gentleman, I believe, in Eastern Oregon. It is nearly impossible for all these small businesses to find the bandwidth to go on promotional trips or trade missions, and that Spirits Board will help bridge that, like the Wine Board has done for the wine industry for the last 2 decades. We believe our industry is about 30 years behind the wine industry, Oregon wine industry, and we are working to create the landscape wine has had to so successfully grow their industry and as a result, support growing Oregon. Like the wine industry 30 years ago, we have the opportunity to build an industry that can have a huge economic impact on Oregon through employment, agriculture, and tourism. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
Chair?
Yes.
Thank you for that. That's a wonderful presentation, and you've got a lot of very profound facts in there. Do you have something available that you could send to us or give us that would give us that outline that you just presented?
Oh,
Not
yeah.
right now, but I mean, for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that.
That would be very helpful for me.
Yeah, send it to. Great, yeah, thank you.
So one question.
Yeah.
Did you think control state's a good thing to have?
You know, I am very happy here in the state of Oregon. I see a lot of, I'm also on the American Craft Spirits Association, and I hear a lot of people in other states and different struggles. And one of the things I get to tell them is that I don't have to struggle as hard to get access to the shelves here in Oregon, and that is a pretty great thing.
Just for everybody listening, I'm going to ask that same question to
Great.
anybody
Yeah,
who comes up.
yeah, I support you guys. Thank
Okay,
you
thank
for your mission.
Appreciate your time.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think we are now looking at a legislative update. Is that where we are?
Yeah.
Great. A lot of questions about that.
And Rosie's in Salem. So Rosie, I think you're gonna be there. She is. So.
Hey.
Hello.
Okay, you're on.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, late morning. Chair Ball, I'm Rosie Shatkin with the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission, Government Relations Director. There is a lot going on today. I'll just touch on the bills just for today that's on the House floor, and also bills that are coming out of various committees. And so for our bills, House Bill 2931, and that's the bill relating to the reference lab, that is on the floor today, and that bill is being carried by Representative Morgan. Yesterday, we had House Bill 2013, and that's the bill relating to the direct shipper permit for out-of-state brewers. That was able to pass the floor yesterday, came out with full support, but for one legislator. Today, bills that are not necessarily related to us, for example, they're related to us, but not necessarily our priority bills. Senate Bill 11 is going to be on the floor today, and that is related to public meeting laws. And then we have Senate Bill 616 that is increasing the amount of beer and cider that we deliver to the door, and that bill is on the floor today as well. And Senate Bill 538 relating to acceptance of credit card fees and credit card payment is on the floor today as well. Another bill that is of importance to us is the House Bill 3431, and that bill was to address economic inequities. The idea and around that bill is to help cannabis industries that owned by members of BIPOC and from rural communities as well. The question was whether or not to take money out of marijuana funding that's going towards Measure 110, and also whether it should come out of the general funding. I think once they switched it over to general funding, there are a lot more folks who were supportive of the measure, and it passed and went to Ways and Means today. So those are just the bills that are up that will be affecting our agency, and that's for today. Our bills that are still outstanding and in Ways and Means, House Bill 3308, that is around our delivery of alcohol to the door, and also House Bill 3049, and that has to do with labeling. Again, I'm at the Capitol, so I do have people around me. So if you're picking up noise, that's where you're getting it from. So apologies there. House Bill 3049 is also in Ways and Means. And so I am here also just speaking to legislators and ensuring that those bills will come up for a hearing sometime soon. And that's about it. I don't know if you have any questions for me, or Craig, do you have any additional update? I know there are a couple of bills that are out there, like Senate Bill 1095 that came out of the Rules Committee and will be scheduled for a vote on the floor as well. But because I'm not quite sure whether it went to Ways and Means, I will have to check that out, but because the members are not back, legislative members from the Republican Party are not back on the Senate floor, the senators are not hearing bills today.
So,
yeah, Rosie, that's a great, I mean, no, it's a lot going on in Salem because of the year. But generally, I'm really pleased with where our budget is. It is ready to go to the floor. The alcohol delivery bill is ready to go. The 2013 is the one that Ms. Postgate and you all have been made aware of.
Really? Did you really just say that?
Yep. Making sure that we've got the language we need for the settlement of the litigation that we've looked at. And then the one that Rosie hit there at the end is 1095, which is this bill that talks to the number of congressional districts in Oregon and would actually expand the membership of this commission from 7 to 9. And so along with a bunch of other commissions. So the big thing I think that Rosie hit is, you know, how are the members going to come together from the two parties and get these bills moving here. And so that's what I think Rosie's, like many people, waiting down there in Salem to see how that's, you know, how it's going to impact all of these important policy bills. It was interesting when it's Jeremy Miller from Enterprise Management spoke to the Wilsonville build they're working on. I checked with Nathan and Rose, but I think that build relates to the lab, the testing lab we've been talking about. I think that build will be where that lab might be. I'll double check on that. So it's just, all these things, of course, are related. But I'm really pleased with how the legislature has listened and partnered with where we are and where we need to go in both the distilled spirits and the cannabis space. And so I feel like we're really on track as much as any agency can be at this time during this session. So thanks, Rosie, for that update.
Rosie, you have a
No
question?
worries. Sure. And you know, one other very important bill that I did forget to mention, it's not one of our priority bills, but it is a bill that is supported by a lot of the folks in the wine industry and beer industry as well. And it's a bill that I believe Oregon Recovers is behind, and Representative Sanchez and Representative Nose are the primary sponsors of the bill. And it's a bill to sort of and we would be, if the bill does pass, we would be, OLCC would be tasking the task force as soon as the bill become effective, which we are pretty supportive of as well. And the bill is just to have a conversation around addiction, alcohol addiction. I believe it's in support of looking at beer and wine taxes and sort of acknowledging the fact that beer and wine is a really critical component to the discussion that we're having today around distilled alcohol. So I think that bill is an acknowledgement that there is more that needs to be done beyond the discussion today as well. But that bill was, I believe, sent to Ways and Means and will likely get a hearing.
What bill is that, Rose?
That bill is House Bill 3610, 3610. And I will forward a list of the bills that I've discussed today.
Rosie, my question has to do with what appears to be purely political gamesmanship within the legislature. Where do we stand with that as far as the session ending and bills that are out there? And then I can't let you move on without saying, I hope that discussion that Senator Sanchez is doing at some point will bring in marijuana as well as not just alcohol. If we're going to have a discussion around abuse and use and who gets to pay for it. So
on the first question, Chair Revolt, members of the commission, on the first question, we love everyone and we don't look at this as a political gamesmanship so much as they are utilizing the resources that they must. So in order to exercise their political will, so to speak. On the bill with Representative Sanchez, admittedly, Representative Sanchez has been an extraordinary partner in the discussion around OLCC. I think I'm not going out on a limb to say that she's very supportive of the control system as well, in that some of the issues that we're seeing, we likely would not be having these type of conversation if we weren't in a control system that is very public and allows us to view it publicly. So those bills will likely, not sure if the Republicans decide not to come back, and they will likely come back maybe to pass the budget bills. But if they do not come back, some of the policy bills will not be heard towards the end of session. We will just simply run out of time.
Commissioners? Thank you, Rosie. I think we're ready to move on to reviewing the draft of the vendor allocation policy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Jennifer, did you have something, Jennifer?
No, I'm sorry. I was just telling her thank you and it was delayed.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So I'll lead on the next item is review and discussion of the draft vendor allocation policy that we should have received. Rich is not feeling well. He's going to take the day. So I'm going to step in on this one. This is also an important piece of moving out of some of the crisis that you all have led through and I've parachuted into. It's kind of really the first piece. And I mentioned Rich because he did a lot of work on this. I want to publicly thank Rich Evans for working on this policy, as well as our able counsel, Ms. Postgate. We also reached out to our association to see if they had any input in how to clean up and give clear policy on this issue of the vendor allocated and rare spirits that were really at the center of a lot of the crisis of a couple months ago. So I'm going to walk through this really briefly after giving those kudos to Rich. So I think what we've got in this policy is really cleaning up what really breaks into three groups of distilled spirits within vendor allocated spirits. And these are our rarest spirits. Usually you've got those that are allocated to the store. You've got those that are allocated to the chance to purchase program that we have. And then you have what is called the safety stock. And the safety stock, from my read of the issue, was really where the calamity occurred, where we had some of that stock diverted. And so this makes clear that once distilled spirits are allocated into those three categories, no one can influence where they go. And that there will be a plan of how all of those are moved to the stores, to the chance to purchase, and then the safety stock will be audited. Nicole Paxton's here raising her hand in the back. So when this speaks to having the OLCC auditor report what happens to every bottle in this program, that's going to be Nicole's job, is auditing that and reporting that to myself and to then you as the commission. So why did I bring it today is I want to make this very clear. This is a direction that we'll be going over with my staff, all of our employees. You can see in the definitions of employee, it's all employees, including limited duration and temporary. But here's the key. I want this to apply to you all too, to the commission members. And as you all know, I can't, I work for the commission, but I think this will really clear up for all of us how we abide by a policy to make sure that the overarching policy is that these rare spirits, that the public have the opportunity to buy them as much as possible. Our employees, if they want to purchase them, they're not available right now for the chance to purchase, but they need to go to the store like any other member of the public or go on the Oregon Liquor Search. And there's not going to be any influencing of who gets those bottles once that plan is set. So that's really the overview of this. Ms. Postgate, I don't know if I missed anything that you wanted to hit. I'm sure Rich could have done a better job, but again, he was not well enough to come and do this. And so I'm willing to answer any questions if you have.
Commissioners?
I think that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think learning from mistakes is not insanity. That's good.
When do you think we're going to make this policy in effect?
I'd like you to move to adopt it today.
If I may. So we actually need to give it some time. It can't be adopted today. So the motion is to ask Director Prince to execute it on your behalf. I'm sorry, I can't remember if it's a delegated authority to you or just to sign on your behalf. Because of labor negotiation interest, you have to give a certain amount of time to the interested labor organizations to have an opportunity to review this and make a demand for bargaining if they want to do that, because there is a disciplinary component of this for employees. So this is part of your labor relations. So it could be as soon as 14 days. 14 days from Monday, I think, whenever it was sent by DAS, by the way, another component of DAS. So It could happen in as soon as 2 weeks. It depends. If there's a demand to bargain, then it could be another couple of months, but it'll happen soon.
But these are the types of rules that we have the authority to create as an organization.
This is a policy and there's big difference than a rule. And I'm sorry, it's me, but so this is absolutely, as an organization, you have the authority to adopt this policy.
So, and Ms. Postgate, the suggested motion, I think, does that still stand? As far as the giving our labor organizations an opportunity to look at it, especially because of where we are, I think we can still.
Okay, I need to make, if you can give me a second, I need to make some corrections. I think I made some last minute corrections that actually made it not compliant, and that's my fault. So as Laura's handing me a pen.
We're gonna take a break at some point,
And then we can come back.
and we can come back and have it motion prepared. We can go from there.
Thank you.
The concern was that, it's nothing, but just to make sure, because this was put together, there are always last minute changes, and anything that's really grammatical or minor, that really shouldn't change the substance of it. The idea is to still give Director Prince the authority to sign this, even if we find a last minute, like period or comma that needs to get put in. So we were trying to create a motion that would allow us to all have yet another look at this and make sure that it's we don't have to look at it 3 months from now and go, oh, that doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
So, yeah, if you just give me a minute, I can change the motion.
That being the case, I think we're gonna move to contested cases at this point. Integrity management, then Midnight Club.
Maybe even hear it against the same time.
Good morning still.
Commissioners. For the record, my name is Nicole Mitchell, marijuana licensing technician and the case presenter in these matters. Today, you'll be considering the 3 proposed orders on show cause that pertain to Henry Doiven in his individual capacity as member of Integrity Management LLC. You'll hear argument from Mr. Doiven's attorney, William Giorso, regarding the exceptions he has filed in response to the proposed orders. As required by our rules, we will confine remarks to the evidence of record and focus discussion on the exceptions he has filed. Prior to Mr. Giorso, however, I will give a brief summary of the issue, the procedural history, and key points in the ALJ's opinion. After you hear from Mr. Giorso, I'll have the opportunity to respond to the arguments raised and answer any questions you may have. So the issue. The only issue you must decide is whether you agree with the ALJ's determination that Mr. Doiven did not show good cause for failing to timely appear at the hearing on September 22nd, 2022, and is therefore not entitled to relief from default. If you agree with the ALJ's decision, as is Commission staff's recommendations, then commissioners are asked to 1, adopt the proposed orders as they are written by the ALJ as final orders, and direct that final orders by default be entered in the underlying cancellation cases. If you disagree with the proposed order and find Mr. Doiven did have good cause for failure to timely appear, then the final orders would be substantially modified to that conclusion. And the practical effect would be a newly scheduled hearing held solely for Mr. Doiven in his individual capacity to argue the merits of the underlying cancellation cases. Going into a bit of the procedural history, just to explain how we got here today. On May 17th, 2022, the OLCC issued notices of proposed license cancellation against 3 vertically integrated businesses held by the licensee of record Integrity Management LLC and its members, Henry Doiven and Megan Caves. The violations alleged included diversion of marijuana both in and out of state, multiple occurrences where Mr. Doiven refused to admit OLCC regulatory specialists into areas of the premises to monitor compliance, and failure to make video surveillance records available for the specific times when diversion was alleged to have occurred.
On September 14th, 2022, OLCC amended the notice to add the charge that licensee had exercised license privileges in violation of the immediate suspension order that was issued on the same 3 licenses in April of 2022. Those are separate cases than the ones before you today. All the parties defaulted and the immediate suspension is still currently in effect, pending the resolution of the underlying cancellation cases and the show cause matter before you. A couple weeks prior to the scheduled hearing of September 22nd, 2022, Mr. Giorso as counsel filed a notice of withdrawal of counsel, notifying that he no longer represented any of the parties in the cases. On the day of the hearing, ALJ, the Administrative Law Judge Joe Allen, convened the hearing at 9 a.m. via WebEx, which is a virtual video conferencing platform, and no one appeared within the 15-minute grace period identified in the notice. The ALJ declared a default on September 27th, 2022. OLCC requested that the ALJ convene a show cause hearing to allow Mr. Doivan to present evidence of good cause for failing to appear at the designated time and date. OLCC made this request after learning that Mr. Doivan appeared late to the hearing after he appeared at the hearing, but it was late after the time given in the notice. A show cause hearing was then held on November 17th, 2022, resulting in the 3 proposed orders before the commission, with timely exceptions filed by Mr. Giorso on behalf of Henry Doivan. A couple key points in the ALJ's opinion discusses the burden of proof. The ALJ correctly stated that Mr. Doivan bears the burden of proving by ponderance of the evidence that circumstances beyond his control prevented him from attending the hearing. The ALJ cited the correct rules discussing and defining good cause, and that's in OAR 137-003-0501 sub 7, which identifies good cause as when an action, delay, or failure to act arises from excusable mistake, surprise, excusable neglect, reasonable reliance on the statement of a party or agency relating to procedural requirements, or from fraud, misrepresentation, or other misconduct of a party or agency participating in the hearing. The ALJ correctly concluded that Mr. Doivan failed to show his inability to access the hearing in a timely manner was due to any of these good cause factors. In essence, the ALJ found that though Mr. Doivan intended to participate, his actions did not fall within the scope of good cause. And the bottom line here is that the circumstances which prevented Mr. Doivan from timely appearing were well within his control. The judge specifically found that excusable mistake or excusable neglect did not apply. And this was based on a finding that Mr. Doivan's admitted delay in accessing the hearing and his failure to follow the instructions in the notice. According to Mr. Doivan, that delay was due, at least in part, to his failure to initiate first call to the WebEx platform until 14 minutes after the designated start time of the hearing and 1 minute before the time specified for default. Commission staff finds that the ALJ made a sound legal determination of good cause in these cases. OLCC was not required to request a show cause hearing, but did so on behalf of Mr. Doivan so that an impartial venue with an experienced ALJ would make full findings of facts and determinations that would afford Mr. Doivan due process to the full extent possible in administrative forum. Accordingly, Commission staff recommends that the proposed orders as written be adopted as final orders in these matters. Thank you, and I will turn it over to you, Mr. Giorso, to discuss the exceptions filed in these cases.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. When Oregon legalized cannabis, it invited people like my client, Mr. Doivan, to come to this state and invest, in most cases, many hundreds of thousands of dollars. Mr. Doivan wasn't born, didn't reside here. Don't know that he ever visited this state. But he came here really at the invitation of this state and invested many hundreds of his personal thousands of dollars in it. At one point had 9 licenses in this state. Purchased real property, went through the licensing process, paid the fees, obtained the insurances, bought the equipment, improved real property, employed people, and paid taxes. And as we know, this is, and as it should be, a very heavily regulated industry. He's a sophisticated guy and he understood that. He understands it today. What happened on September 22nd is an unreasonable adherence to a procedural rule. There's law that applies in these cases, mostly administrative law. There are facts that apply in these cases. And then there are procedural rules. And in this case, what we have is this strict adherence to a procedural rule that you will appear within 15 minutes of the time set for a hearing. And if you don't, you forfeit everything. Your opportunity to have your day and your case heard on its merits and decided on its merits is forfeited over strict adherence to procedure. And that is never the preferred or desired process, and should not be the procedure or the practice of the ALJ in this industry. And here's why. Mr. Doigan did appear. He attempted to make contact. He started contacting the ALJ's office before the 15 minutes lapsed. And if you look at the last page of Mr. Allen's opinion, he stated that fact is set forth at the top, in the top paragraph. Yes, it was 14 minutes when he started making the phone call, but it was within the time frame. The senior administrative law judge describes the situation as, despite the technical difficulties experienced by his first attempt, he wasn't able to get through within the 15 minutes. Within that 15 minutes, he emailed, he obtained the correct number and dialed in 3 minutes after the hearing was adjourned. This is not a situation where somebody just doesn't show up, but the practice and the policy should be that if an effort is made to participate and have your matter determined on the merits, these were serious allegations that what was at stake here was the suspension of 3 of the 9 licenses that this man had that were worth, considerable investment. That the merits of those suspensions be, the decision of the suspensions be heard on the merits. In our brief, I set forth this argument that Oregon Revised Statute, it's 18.160, states that the discretion of an administrative law judge is not something that is absolute. Expressly, the objective of these kinds of hearings, either at the administrative level, administrative agencies, or in the judicial process, is the objective and orderly determination of cases on the merits. And if you, in circumstances like this, have this strict adherence, what it invites is the impression that due process is not afforded people. When this much is at stake, there would have been no prejudice to the agency or its representatives in having that hearing go forward that day or rescheduling, based on the fact that a businessman who's invested many hundreds of thousands of dollars into the state of Oregon, has created jobs and commerce, was unable, because of a technicality to get through on his first phone call. I understand that at some point you have to quit waiting for people. Is it 10 minutes? Is it 15 minutes? Is it 20 minutes? At some point, you have to quit waiting for people when the matter is calendared on the administrative agency's docket. But if within that time frame, an individual in the position of my client has made an attempt to participate and resolve things on the merits, then they ought to be afforded the simple opportunity procedurally to go forward and have it decided, facts sorted out, the law applied to those facts, and an outcome that is decided on the merits, which is the favored process. Stripping people of these kinds of due process and stripping them of this type of an investment is disfavored on strict procedural grounds, especially when, as in this case, the administrative law judge acknowledges he made the attempt within the time frame. It was a technical difficulty that prevented him from getting through, and within 2 minutes, he's forfeited and cut off from having the case decided that way. So we would just ask that the commissioners send this back for another scheduled hearing, make it clear to the administrative law judges that the policy and the practice under circumstances like this are to determine issues on the merits and not procedurally be prejudicial to people where they've made the attempt. Technical difficulty is they've avoided being able to have access, and then everything that they've invested in this state is forfeited. That's what we ask you to do. Thank you.
Ms. Mitchell?
Really briefly, Mr. Giorso cited to statutes and rules that are not controlling in this forum, on this administrative procedure. He did cite to workers' compensation and the Oregon Rules of Civil Procedure, and I just believe that the administrative law judge looked at the correct burden of proof, he analyzed it with the correct applicable rules, and he made fair and correct findings, and he asked that you adopt the proposed orders as final orders as written by the administrative law judge, and enter final orders by default in the underlying cancellation cases. Thank you.
Chair,
Yes.
but the ALJ did acknowledge that Mr. Dubian was attempting to make an effort on that 14-minute mark within the grace period. He was attempting.
He did, yes, Commissioner Floyd.
Okay.
He did acknowledge that, and that was part of the assessment, and it was prepared.
I need to ask a question for, I think we should probably recess to deliberate on this case and then come back and do the other. Or would you like us to do both at this time? Or do you have an opinion?
Are you talking about the executive session?
Yes.
Also, oh, we should separate them.
Great.
Are you asking me something else?
No.
I need Laura to speak.
Looking for my statement.
Here and then come.
Any other questions, commissioners?
So Chair Wall, is there oral argument being presented on dummies?
Yeah.
Apparently not.
There is.
There is. Oh, thank you.
So yes, to answer, and I apologize, I actually wasn't aware. So yes, I would recommend that you recess to deliberate on this one and then take the next one. I think that would probably be easiest. But it's of course it's in your purview to decide that.
So we are going to recess to go into administrative executive session to deliberate on the matter that's before us. We back online? We have. We are back in session regarding the contested case hearing on integrity management. It is still Thursday, May the 18th. We have a motion.
I move to adopt the proposed order and issue a final order of cancellation.
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Doherty.
No,
Commissioner Doherty, I think you must have the other meeting open. Maybe you could mute your other device. Commissioner Floyd.
I'm gonna say no.
Commissioner Chapon Porter,
Yes.
Commissioner Miletus.
Yes.
Chair Bavall.
Yes. Thank you. We are now moving to the Rimini Nightclub, Restaurant and Sports Bar LLC.
Good morning.
Yeah, well, it's good afternoon now, I'm afraid.
Good afternoon. Yes, you're right. Chair of all members of the commission, I'm Michael Shine, lead member for the Administrative Hearings Division. And seated next to me is Attorney Zachary DeBlow, representing Remy's Nightclub, Restaurant and Sports Bar LLC, and Gloria Velasco. I'm just going to give a summary of the case, then turn things over to Mr. DeBlow to argue his client's exceptions to the proposed order of license cancellation, after which I will ask for a chance to present staff's response to the exceptions before you retire to deliberate. As required by our rules, we will confine our remarks to the evidence of record and focus discussion on the exceptions filed. Remy's is a large nightclub with a capacity of 320 patrons located in Salem, Marion County, Oregon. On January 5, 2022, OLCC sent licensee a notice of proposed license cancellation under ORS 471-315-1C due to a history of serious and persistent problems, which I will sometimes refer to as a history or HSPP. An HSPP is probably the most serious alcohol charge we have. Under the commission's penalty schedule, this is a category 1 violation with a presumptive penalty of license cancellation. The case was heard by Senior Administrative Law Judge Allison Webster over 5 days, February 27, 28, March 1 through 3, 2023. Licensee was present and was represented at that time by attorney Robert Sepp. OLCC was represented by case presenters, both myself and Eli Modell. At the hearing on the second amended notice, staff alleged 37 incidents in violation of the HSPP statute occurring over 17 months from July 4, 2021 to December 11, 2022. To prove these incidents, OLCC presented testimony by Salem Regional Manager Joel Lujan, OLCC Liquor Inspector Gary Wellborn, 16 Marion County Sheriff deputies, and 1 Woodburn Police Department officer. Licensee Velasco testified on her own behalf and presented testimony from her new security manager, a gentleman named Mr. Mora Ochoa. After carefully analyzing the evidence, making 69 findings of fact, and comparing the evidence to a review of this commission's case law precedents on HSPP, Judge Webster recommended to this commission that it should cancel Remy's liquor license based on the history of serious and persistent problems that exist at Remy's, and because licensee failed to carry their burden of proving that they have both the willingness and the ability to control the premises and their patrons. Quoting from the proposed order at page 28, Between July 2021 and December 2022, a period of 17 months, there were at least 31 serious problem incidents inside the licensed premises or in the immediate vicinity of the premises involving patrons of the premises and or related to licensee's exercise of the license privilege. The majority of the serious incidents were disturbances involving violence or threats of violence. Other serious incidents during the pertinent period include DUI arrests, a minor inside the premises, and public drunkenness, visibly intoxicated patrons. Close quote. This conclusion is amply supported by the evidence. It is there to read in your packet. I'll just mention a couple of brief examples before turning this over to Mr. DeBlow. A deputy who responded on September 19, 2021 at 2:40 a.m. to a call regarding an unconscious patron left in front of the premises who was suspected of a drug overdose wrote this, quote, "There were people walking through the parking lot with beer bottles. Many of the patrons appeared overly impaired and were borderline aggressive with me due to my presence in my marked patrol vehicle and uniform. I was legitimately concerned for the firefighters and medical personnel's safety should an interaction with an overly impaired patron go wrong and they become hostile. There was a mob-like mentality in the crowd that no doubt was fueled by the overconsumption of alcohol and the fact the nightclub as a whole has no control over their patrons' movements or actions. There was only one security guard on the scene in the parking lot from what I could see through the sea of people. There were over 50 to 60 patrons who were creating havoc and mayhem for us, the first responders trying to locate and assist the patron. In speaking with the solo security guard in the parking lot, he said they are a private company contracted and they have no control over the nightclub when it gets like this. He said activities typically spill into the parking lot. The partying and often physical fighting continues during and after the nightclub closes. That's finding of fact 18. On November 7, 2021 at 2:11 a.m., licensee's own security called to report numerous fights breaking out, intoxicated patrons screaming, vehicles peeling out of the parking lot. That's finding of fact 25. On November 21, 2021 at 3:15 a.m., licensee security reported being assaulted by males fighting in the premises parking lot when he tried to break up the fight. A responding deputy reported seeing numerous vehicles with open alcohol in plain sight and that the person describing themselves as the manager of Remy's was on the scene and clearly intoxicated. That's findings of fact 31 and 32. That was 2021. Was there any improvement in 2022? Actually not. Here's from a deputy's report in April 2022, quote, "This bar is completely out of control. There are constant large crowds of people out front of the business, and we respond to fights and disturbances there on a frequent basis. I think this establishment needs to be investigated for narcotics involvement and also overservice of alcohol. Every time I go to the establishment, it appears people are using stimulants." Finding of fact 45. On a November 28, 2022 fight culminated in discharge of a firearm in the parking lot. Marion County Sheriff Department Sergeant Dershon wrote to the OLCC, quote, "This incident is tipping the scales in my opinion, and the need to act on the business is imminent to protect life. The business is showing a complete lack of accountability and cannot control their patrons, even with the presence of on-site security. We have documentation that every weekend we are called to the location." Finding fact 59. Detective Schwab and Sergeant Dershon testified that of all OLCC licensed premises, Remy's is the single biggest drain on law enforcement resources in unincorporated Marion County. And this creates another public safety risk aside from the obvious immediate risk to patrons and staff at the premises. Police, fire, and ambulance are not an unlimited resource, and when they're drawn away week after week to Remy's, they're unavailable to serve other emergencies. Commission staff is asking that you enter the well-reasoned 33-page proposed order issued by Judge Webster as your final order in this matter with no changes. However, licensee has filed 2 exceptions, and I will now turn it over to Attorney DeBlow to argue his client's exceptions to the proposed order. Once he's finished, please recognize me again so I may present staff's reply to the exceptions. Thank you.
Members of the commission, thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of my client Remy's. My name is Zachary Dablow. I'm an attorney in Salem, Oregon. I understand that we're supposed to limit our conversations to the contents of the proposed order. I don't know if some of the citations that he just made are in this proposed order. I don't believe all of them are. I think it's testimony to that hearing. And I don't think you're going to hear Remy say that there wasn't a series of problems that they were addressing over this period of time. I'll remind the commissioners that this was the period of time in which much of our population was stuck in a box to avoid COVID for multiple months, not allowed to go outside, not allowed to socialize, not allowed to engage in normal social activities. And the 17-month period identified by Mr. Shine is starting right in that zone. COVID brought us some other changes as well. It brought the idea of trying to keep restaurants open by engaging in new ways of organizing businesses and delivering food, particularly outdoor food stands. That is particularly germane to the issues that I raised for you to consider on my exceptions today. I'll explain why. You're going to find in the early findings of facts in this order a brief and somewhat cursory description of the idea that a separate business that is not a licensed business, it's a taco stand, Remy's Tacos, is located immediately outside the actual licensed premises in this same parking lot. When you see these litany of examples, including several of the ones that Mr. Shane just gave you, they're talking about things that happen at 2:40 a.m. The licensed premises is closed. They're talking about things that happen at 3:15 a.m. The licensed premises is closed. They're talking about patrons of the premises. The licensed premises is closed. When do those things stop? When do those people stop being patrons? Because now they're at a taco stand. They're not at the licensed premises. And these distinctions are somewhat important if we're going to start licensing behavior, because licenses are important but they're not unlimited in their scope of what they allow us to do. And I would say that this new problem flummoxed Remy's as much as it flummoxed the OLCC. And here's what I mean. There are 4 interventions that are described to the OLCC in the 17-month period that Mr. Chinese described. Those 4 interventions were on the 12th of October of 2021, and it amounted to, do you have a video system and do you know how to operate it? No discussion of the interplay of the taco stands, how this all works. No discussion of how to clear people out. When do they stop becoming patrons? How do you create a safer situation? Not even brought up. On 3/22, I want you to check IDs. We want to recognize the importance of early signs of intoxication, the importance of preventing over-service, and the need for a security log. All fine, excellent recommendations. None of them are really addressing most of the behavior that is supporting the finding that is at the final conclusion, right? So 11/29, finally, we got a recommendation of closing earlier, last call earlier, adding more security, reducing capacity control. Now, this is just 2 months before the notice of proposed license cancellation, and just 4 months before the actual cancellation of the proposed order. And at that time, they're saying patrol outside, limit re-entry, reduce shot size, reporting activity, better video. Again, no mention of how to interplay a non-licensed business providing. So you don't want people loitering, right? This is a problem for definitions, right? Because are you loitering if you order tacos and they're not ready for 45 minutes? No, you're not. You're a customer waiting for your food. How do you make someone disperse in that instance? They've ordered their food. It's not there yet. Not only that, there are no allegations in this proposed order that have anything to do with Remy's serving alcohol outside of the premises, of serving alcohol outside of licensed hours. Those facts aren't in here and they won't be in here. So, there's a conclusion to draw from that. And some of that is that people are coming to a taco stand and they're doing what they're doing. There's no linkage here between that. And I understand that licensed premises are generally responsible for what happens in and around the licensed premises. But if there's not a clear demarcation of where that ends, are we now saying that licensed premises have to have 24-hour security? No, we're not saying that. I know we're not saying that. That's not our policy and it's not how it's going to apply, right? But here we have the cancellation of a license based on the notion that of an unwillingness and inability to control. And the first suggestion about limiting the taco stand hours or using that as a means of controlling and eliminating some dual status of patronage and sort of procedural gray area comes on the 9 conditions that you must follow in absoluteness without any gray area at all, or your license is suspended. That's the first time the OLCC recognized the problem of this interplay. So to then take the next step of saying this licensee clearly is unwilling over that whole period of time to address a situation that is in fact new and novel coming out of COVID, is just not supported by this record, because you can kind of see how, where they have taken mitigation measures, this findings of facts describes them as basically another incident where somebody gets assaulted and you remove them from the premises and call the police on them. That's not necessarily signs of not mitigation. You're doing what you're supposed to do, which is putting a consequence for poor behavior in your establishment. Over time, that creates an expectation that certain behaviors aren't going to be allowed and tolerated, which is exactly what the OLCC wants this licensee to do. So as they're progressing on dealing with this new issue, we finally get to February where it says now shut down the taco stand early, and that's been done. The only reservation this licensee had was in making a calculation of, can I bring in enough revenue with the period that the OLCC has suggested? And this isn't, you know, a perfect science, because like I said, they still haven't even kind of gotten to the root cause until this exact 9 lists, but they're saying close early. Okay. And she says, well, I don't want to close at 12:30. I like to close at 1, because that allows me to do this. And the OLCC is saying that, sort of requesting to have some back and forth about the sort of scope of these that are being basically offered at the sort of 9th hour, then amounts to too little too late by the licensee. And that's the fundamental problem that I have with the order, right? So that we've got these sort of cursory, hey, there's a taco stand, they both sort of serve the guests. Well, that's not a complete analysis of the issue sufficient to actually look at what Remy's is dealing with, right? Because they've got people that leave and then they come back and get tacos. What are they supposed to do about that? Nothing in this order even addresses how that should have happened. And that's why it's completely sort of ahead of itself in asking for license cancellation before we've had to actually take a look at measures that address the actual problem, which is a non-licensed facility being open right next to a licensed facility, and how that works. We're already at cancellation. So I think given the sort of base of the order in and of itself, saying too little too late, when essentially the OLCC didn't even sort of recognize the core problem until 16 months of the 17 months later, smacks a little of unfairness and not sort of getting down to the germane points of why this was happening and why it shouldn't be happening in the future. So that's the summary of my argument. I take questions if you need to.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is the licensee's obligation to control the premises. It is not the OLCC's obligation to control the premises. There are a number of problems with the argument made, and I'll just try to summarize them. First, this commission's precedents have created a presumption that persons who come to the premises come there due to the presence of the alcohol license. And I quote from Taylor's in La Brisa. Taylor's is a 2020 decision in a history case. And they said in La Brisa, the commission found that the language related to the sale or service of alcohol does not require showing that the patron involved purchased, was served, or consumed alcohol on the licensed premises. The commission presumes that the persons are coming to the premises because the licensee has a license and for the purpose of consuming alcoholic liquor. There's nothing new or novel about the problem of people loitering or hanging out around licensed premises. I dealt with it in Speakeasy case. I dealt with it in Trio Club, which are cases I did back in 2018, 2019. And that's a constant problem, that people do hang out around licensed premises and create various problems. They fight, they deal drugs, and this history statute is intended in part to deal with the very issue of the neighborhood impacts of people hanging out outside the premises and fighting and peeling out and creating a public safety hazard. So the commission presumes the persons are coming there because of the liquor license. Everybody coming to Remy's to hang out in the Remy's parking lot, to eat and drink by Remy's Taco Stand and to raise hell on weekend nights is presumed to be there to patronize Remy's licensed business. That presumption holds at least unless licensee presents specific evidence to disprove it. But Remy's never presented any evidence to overcome this presumption in this case, probably because this argument is being raised for the first time by a new attorney. Second, in this case, and this is really important, we're dealing with a full on-premises commercial sales license, which under commission rules is required to have food service. That's part of the deal. You can't have this license unless you provide food service. Licensee Velasco testified that she owns Remy's Taco Stand that was located immediately outside the door of this licensed premises. The food was cooked in the kitchen inside the licensed premises, and it was used by the patrons who went in and out to eat their food, to get food for the licensed premises.
It's not a separate business.
It's a separate business in the sense that it's not the licensed premises. It doesn't hold an alcohol license. But she testified that she owns it and it was served, the food was cooked out of the licensed premises. They weren't
Shared
cooking it
ownership.
in the taco stand.
Shared ownership.
Shared, oh yes, it was hers. Yeah. So under those circumstances, that makes the taco stand an integral part of the operation of the licensed business. Licensee can hardly disclaim responsibility for persons who come to patronize the taco stand and, according to the evidence and the findings, to drink from open containers in the parking lot at the taco stand after the nightclub is closed. In addition, the evidence expressly shows that many of those people are coming out of the club. They're patrons of the club to get their tacos. So it's not just people who come to the taco stand who are out there in the parking lot. They're patrons going in and out, or patrons who have left the nightclub and are staying in the parking lot for the after party, if you will. In Taylor's at page 53, it says incidents that start inside the premises and carry over, continue, or spill out onto areas adjacent to the licensed premises, or that occur in the immediate vicinity of the premises and involve patrons of the premises are counted against the licensee. And that's what Judge Webster did here. Third, the evidence was clear, and the proposed order found that aside from Remy's nightclub and Remy's Tacos, all the other businesses fronting that parking lot closed by midnight. That's finding of fact number 4. That means there was no other reason for the big party in the parking lot other than Remy's operation. Fourth, OLCC has a specific rule that was repeatedly violated by Remy's, which is 006-03475A. No licensee or permittee will permit anyone, that's anyone, not just patrons, anyone, to drink alcohol in any parking lot that the licensee controls that is associated with the licensed business, unless the commission has approved the sale or service of alcohol beverages in the area. Remy's parking lot is not an approved alcohol service area. You can't defend against a history violation by showing other violations here. Fifth, and finally, many of the incidents in the parking lot did expressly involve patrons spilling out from the premises or attacks on security out there in the parking lot, and which is expressly included in a history case. Whenever there's an attack on a security or other employee, that's an incident that counts, even if it occurs out in the street. We've had cases where it happened out in the street. Licensee never takes the time in their very brief 1-paragraph exception on this point to sort out which incidents occurred, which incidents it thinks should be disqualified. With 31 serious incidents in 17 months, they would have to knock out 14 to 19 of them just to have a reasonable argument that this wouldn't be a history case anyway. We have precedents finding that a history case with as few as 7 incidents in 13 months is still a valid history of serious and persistent problems. Here, the ALJ found 31 serious incidents in 17 months. So I'm going to move on to just the issue of willingness and ability to control the premises, because there is some question here that's been raised about that. Nothing changed here. The problems persisted as bad as ever, starting from early in 2021 until late 2022. And it wasn't something new due to COVID. We actually, there was evidence and a specific finding that the premises reopened after COVID on June 4, 2021. And the first incident charged here is July 4, 2021. So we excluded, there were incidents from prior to COVID. There were a few things during COVID. We excluded those in this notice.
That should
We
be
very
discussed, that's not
carefully.
the order.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, if that's an objection, and excuse me, I didn't interrupt you, Mr. Shine. It's actually something that I was going to address for the commission, not a substantive issue, but a point of procedure. The commission may consider anything that is in the record. The ALJ's duty is to create the record for your consideration. As far as today goes, the exceptions are usually to the proposed order, but Mr. Shine may present anything that was in the record. He's not limited to just those facts that were in the proposed order. And the same goes for licensees council.
So the proposed order has a specific finding that they reopened after COVID on the 4th of June, 2021. And there's the first incident that's charged, it's of record, was July 4, 2021. Now, the ALJ found that the licensee was unwilling to sign restrictions that were offered, and this was referred to, including an early going restriction. The Speakeasy case shows that, and is quoted in the proposed order, shows that this demonstrates a lack of willingness to control the premises when you will not accept restrictions proposed by the OLCC. This is evidence of a lack of willingness to control the premises. Despite interventions, and I want to address the interventions because that was discussed by council. There were interventions in education and verbal instruction provided by OLCC inspectors in October and December 2021 and March and November 2022. There was a Marion County order finding that this premises was a specific problem area that was in violation of their ordinance that was sent out in December 2021. OLCC served the first version of the notice of proposed license cancellation, listing all the incidents until that date in January 2022. So this licensee was on notice that there were serious problems, must have been in January 2022 when they received the first version of our proposed cancellation. Nonetheless, as of the hearing in February, March 2023, licensee had barely implemented any changes, only moving the initial last call to 1:50 a.m. from 2 a.m. Now, as stated in the proposed order at pages 30 to 31, for more than a year after OLCC first raised with licensee concerns about disturbances and unlawful activities at the premises, licensee has been unwilling or unable to adequately control the licensed premises and patron behavior. At this point, licensee is stating willingness to make certain changes and to accept restrictions on the license is simply too little, too late. And it is too little, too late. Licensees, when they get to hearing, they will say, well, we're going to fix it. But that's, that doesn't really cut it. They had every chance to fix it. Now, Attorney DeBlow pointed to a few specific incidents in the exceptions, the written exceptions that were filed with you, where he said, security properly called police, so these shouldn't count. This commission specifically addressed this issue back in 2001 in its final order in the hydrant. There it considered it's a split in its precedents, some of which said if the licensee or its employees properly called police or tried to control the problem, we won't count those issues in the history case. Another more recent precedent called Cisco and Poncho said we will count them and we're only going to consider their actions in conjunction with the overall question of willingness and ability. In the hydrant, the commission resolved it in favor of the Cisco and Poncho version. It doesn't matter if the licensee appropriate or their employees appropriately tried to control the disorder. It's still an incident of disorder when there's violence at the premises or a minor on the premises, whatever it is. And then later on, we look at the overall willingness and ability. That's been the case law repeatedly, as recently as Taylor's in 2020 of this commission. And so that argument is actually not an accurate argument unless you change your precedent. You should count every single one of the incidents that Judge Webster found because they're all valid under commission precedent. Judge Webster's 33-page proposed order is sound on the evidence, well reasoned on the law as established by this commission. It's staff's view that neither of the small exceptions asserted come close to creating a basis to change the outcome proposed by the judge. Remy's has been out of control for well over a year, was out of control at the time of the hearing. In the interest of public safety, staff respectfully requests the commission adopt the proposed order as written and enter a final order of license cancellation. Unless there are any questions.
Thank you. First.
Chair, I got
Yes.
just one question. Is this business still open currently as we're going through this process? Are they still operating right now?
It's my understanding the answer is yes.
Commissioners? We are going to recess to consider the issues surrounding the Remy nightclub and restaurant split work, and once we've come up with a decision, we will reconvene. It is still Thursday, that May 18th. It's approximately 1:30 in the afternoon. We are reconvening from deliberation on the contested case regarding Remy nightclub and restaurant sports and bar LLC. We have a motion.
No matter Remy's Nightclub, Restaurant and Sports Bar LLC, I move to adopt the proposed order and issue final order of cancellation.
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Japan Porter.
Yeah.
Commissioner Melidas.
Yes.
Chair Raval.
Yes. Thank you. We are now. I believe we're going to have a discussion around the waive penalties and interest related to the Oregon privilege tax on the project.
Thank you. There's Colin.
Good afternoon, Chair Raval. Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Colin Nealand, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the agency. And you have a couple of motions that before you that we'll be talking about today regarding your authority in statute to waive penalties and interest based on the good efforts of a privileged tax filer, but even with all those good efforts, still being in a case where waiving penalties and interest can be approved by the commission if you agree to do so. And one of the things that I've been working on is a project the agency started back that came out of the 2017 legislative session. This was House Bill 2150 during the 2017 legislative session. And it was actually at the request of our stakeholders that file privilege taxes to move from a primarily paper-based system to an online electronic system. And the agency has begun that work, worked with the various folks who are in state government because this has been in a stage gate reviewed project, which means it's gone through rigorous oversight from the IT perspective over at Department of Administrative Services as we've moved forward on this project. But one of the challenges on this project has been that it has not always been in a place where we have been able to go live with our different privileged tax filers in a way that would have avoided them being able to file timely for their regular due dates. And because of that, the former agency leadership had made the decision to be sensitive from a business perspective for our privileged tax filers, that they would approve waiving penalties and interest so that we were not unduly harming our privileged tax filers due to delays on the agency side when we were going live with the project either too late for filers to be able to file when they normally would have been due, or when we were going live and we weren't giving them enough time to provide training, answer questions so they can get familiar with the system and do all of those kinds of things. And again, so that they could, feel like they had the time to put forward the information they would want in the new online system, and again, avoid penalties and interest. And so this is something that under former leadership, there had been direction to approve waiving penalties and interest. It was something I began double checking recently and realized that under that former leadership, we should have come to you and under our statutory authority to request your approval for that. And so that is what we are doing today, is looking to continue the efforts that have been there to support our privileged tax filers to be sensitive to things that were not of their causing, but really due to our cause, even with the best interests of the agency, and not being able to get the releases for the software as soon as we would have liked in a perfect world. And really to be able to make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's and making sure that we are getting the correct approvals for making sure that when we are waiving penalties and interest, that the appropriate approvals have been received. And so that is what you have in front of you today, and be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioners. We're checking on something right now, and so we can, because you're asking us to approve the waive penalties and interest related to the Oregon privileged tax online project, correct?
Correct.
Chair, we just took a few things out of order. We all skipped an agenda item. Which is fine if you want to move it to the end, because I know there are people who've been waiting here all day to do the agent session. We skipped over the executive session, but if you'd like to move it to the end, I'm here. That's fine.
It's been a long time.
Oh, wait.
So we can.
So we're going to delay this for a moment?
Oh, no, we can, we just caught this.
Just, yeah.
So it was like not the right time to interrupt you, and I apologize, just letting. Thank you. So we skipped over an agenda item, the executive session. I think we all just missed it, but if it works, if it works for you, we could just move that to the end and allow the agent. So we would go through this and the agent.
Do with this, then I'll bring this up, and then the one that we skipped previously towards the end. Okay. Commissioner.
So Chair, from my understanding, we need two motions, correct? Okay. So Chair, I move that the commission find that due to OLCC's go live implementation dates of the Oregon Privilege Tax Online software system, many manufacturers were unable to timely pay privilege taxes as required by ORS Chapter 473. Based on this finding, I move further that the commission find that each manufacturer required to pay privilege taxes and subject to the OPTO software system be relieved of penalties and interest for non-payment of privileged taxes, and that such waivers shall be for taxes due as of January 2021 to today. Do we have to take these individually separately?
Yeah. Yes.
Commissioner Curran. Commissioner Curran. Yes, here.
All right, come back to her. Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Dupont Porter.
Yes.
Commissioner Molinas,
Yes.
Commissioner Raval.
Yes,
Excuse me, Chair Raval, sorry.
still yes.
Do we want to hold it open? Or do I just move forward? What would you like me to do?
Quorum.
We have a quorum.
Okay.
So the next one is,
Okay, so motion 2, Chair, I move that the commission.
Yes.
Perfect. I move that
Can
the
you hear me?
Yes.
We got it, Commissioner.
find further that the delay in implementation and training associated with the go live start dates of the Oregon Privilege Tax Online, OPTO, software system will continue until June 30th, 2024. Based on this funding, I move that for all privilege taxes due as of tomorrow, up to and including June 30th, 2024, the commission delegate its authority under ORS 471.060, that'd be subsection 3, to waive penalties and interest to the executive director for all manufacturers who are subject to the OPTO software system, and direct staff to update the delegation policy to reflect this delegation.
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Dupont Porter.
Yes.
Commissioner Molinas,
Yes.
Chair Raval.
yes. Thank you. We would like
Thank
to.
you.
Health Services, is that what I'm doing?
Yes.
The conference petition.
He didn't. Chairman, can you officially remove from the agenda the executive or execution of agreement with Clackamas County for the land partition, which was earlier in the meeting?
As you can see on the original agenda, we have removed the executive agreement for the Clackamas County land partition. More deliberation is needed for that, and we will deal with that perhaps in the June meeting. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Commissioners. I'm Paul Rosenberg, Interim Director of Retail Services. A couple things for you today. I've got, last month you delayed an appointment for a new agent for Klamath Falls 1077. Since that time, the current agent has resigned, or not resigned, has withdrawn her resignation. So that's no longer up for consideration. Any questions on that one?
We simply need to accept that change.
I think you can just accept the withdrawal, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Second matter, I have two applicants for you for store 1077, which is Florence. New appointment as a result of a retirement of the current agent. And we have two finalists for you today from an initial applicant pool of 9 people. First up in the hopper, I've got Jonathan Meyer. So just state your name for the record. I got your 2 minutes and then just let them know when they need to advance the slide.
Okay,
Let you tell me.
Okay.
my name's John Meyer.
John, you're gonna have 7 minutes.
Yep.
And when you get to about what would you like? 30-second, 1 minute? What would you like? Give you-
Whatever, we'll get it done.
I'll give you a 30-second warning.
That work.
Perfect, whenever you're ready. And just so you know, if we interject with questions, I will pause your time. That will not affect your time.
Perfect. All right, well, thank you all for letting me be here to present in front of you. My name is John Meyer. I'm from Florence, Oregon, and I'm applying for the Florence store. Next slide. So we'll talk about my experience first. I've got 23 years with Safeway Albertsons right now currently. I'm the center store operations specialist for Southern Oregon. I currently oversee 19 stores with their grocery, alcohol, GM, HPC, dairy, frozen. And then I oversee the ops that oversee the rest of the store. I've started with Safeway back in 2000. I was on night crew, became a store manager in 6 years. As a store manager, I ran a store in Salem, the small one in South Salem. I ran that for 2 years. I had my second daughter, and so we moved to Florence because I'm like, why not? We can go to Florence, move to the beach. I thought I was gonna be there for 2 years, and 14 years later, I'm still there. I ran the Florence, Oregon Safeway for about 4 years, and then I moved down to the North Bend Safeway. And volume wise, it's like I started on a small store, I went to a medium store, and then I ended at a big store. We were doing almost $900,000 a week in North Bend. When I left that store, I stepped into the operations specialist position. I did the Eugene and Bend market for a while, and now I'm down in Southern Oregon. It's a fantastic position. I love it. I get to coach and train and teach a lot of people. But also, you're running stores. You got 19 stores to keep track of. So if they're missing money, if they are over their labor budget, if they're not hitting their P&L, their sales are dropped, it falls on me to get in there and make sure that we get that taken care of. So that's most of my experience there. So we can go to the next slide. So here's some fun pictures here. So me and my wife have been together for, I think, 25 years now, 24 years. Don't quote me on that. But we have our daughter, Haley, in the top right-hand corner. She is 21, turning 22 here in a week. She's a pharmacist technician at Safeway. My wife works at the school district currently. If we get the store, she'll gladly leave the school system for a while and come work at the liquor store and hang out with us. And then my two middle kids, Emma and Lincoln, are in the middle, 12 and 14, involved in sports and theatrics. These are great pictures. The bottom two of us going to DC. We take a group of middle schoolers every spring break through our community to Washington, DC, New York, Boston, and Philadelphia to try to enhance their learning experience, to keep them in school, keep them going on the right track. So cool little thing. Go to the next slide. So this is my mock draw of what the store currently looks like. It makes it look pretty good like that. So as you see, almost over a third of the stock room is the sales floor and so forth. Let's go to the next slide. So my vision for the current spot of the store is to increase the square footage of the sales floor by extending that back line, adding 46 feet of gondola on the left-hand side. Right now, they have about a 12-inch gondola depth on the shelves. I've got a order pending for 24-inch gondola shelves, which will expand my holding power on the sales floor, cut down on my back stock, increase my selection. By expanding out on the gondola that I have here and straightening out those two middle gondolas, that'll free me up a buy spot where I can do promotions in the front. Also clean up the sales floor where you can see around the whole store and keep it visible to talk to customers and ensure the inventory is safe. But by expanding out with the 24-inch gondolas, that should add about 200 to 300 linear square footage, which will add more selection to the store, which from the talks of the community is what they're looking for, is more of a selection. The other thing is there's a 3-door beer cooler towards the back on the back wall there. That is just a small dab into going into the beer and wine business. This square footage of this store is not very big. But the one thing that people in Oregon especially are missing out on are the canned cocktails. And those canned cocktails are taken out like hotcakes. We got everybody making wine-based canned cocktails, cider-based canned cocktails. But if I own a liquor store, I'll be selling liquor-based canned cocktails. And they're hot. They're just like your seltzers, but with vodkas or tequilas. And it'll be a great addition to the store to improve on the selection and how many we carry. Something that's 6-month plan. So we talked about the gondolas, declutter the stores. So line up these two small gondolas. They're not going to be higher than 5 feet. My mentality when in retail for 23 years, if I can't see over it, it's too tall. So if it blocks my sight, it's too tall. I can't see the customer. I can't see what's behind what's going on. So it'll be under 5 feet in the middle. And then right now they have a million racks all over the place. You can go to the next slide. So they have a bunch of racks all over. So I'll just clean it up. Nice, clean store. That's what I like on my store, Safeways and Albertsons, and that's what I run here. Is just nice and clean. We're replacing the floor, the laminate flooring. You can go actually to the next slide. And this will show you the beautiful laminate flooring they have there on the left. That's the actual picture of the store on the left there, with the dock black shelves. The picture on the right is the example of the flooring I want to put into the store would be the wood flooring. And there shows the nice profile, some nice black shelves. They'll be 24 inches deep, and then we'll go all the way up to the top, 84 inches tall on the walls. We talked about the 3-door cooler, and then painting the walls. You can't really see from the picture I put in there, but it definitely needs some TLC on some painting and reviving it and just getting a new feel. And then replacing security cameras is part of my 6-month plan. Currently, they don't have security cameras, or the employees don't know if they even work. So,
Yeah, just over 30 seconds here.
oh, okay. 2-year plan, find another, let's see, where am I at? All right, so let's just get the next slide. Operation hours, I'm gonna expand that out. Sundays, I'm gonna block to 10 to 7. The rest of the days, I'm gonna expand by 2 to 3 hours depending. Friday, Saturdays, I'm gonna extend a little bit later to make sure that we can capture all the tourists coming over from the valley during the tourist month. Next slide. Budget just kind of gives you the rundown of how much I priced out everything for the 6-month plan and then what my funding looks like. Next slide. Growth, currently right now, the store's been negative. If you take the last 4 years in a row.
Closing statements,
Do what?
closing statements.
Closing statement. All right, go to the last slide. Yeah, Captain Myers liquor store. I mean, let's end on that. So, I just want you guys to know that, been in the retail business, 23 years with Safeway Albertsons, 4 years with Fred Meyers. I've been in a long business. I got 20 more years left before I retire. I can continue what I'm doing now, or I can build something for me and my family's future. I know how to run a grocery store. I proved it over and over again through the company I work for. I know how to run a good operation. I know how to take care of inventory control. I know how to take care of cash and make sure it's secured. And I'm not afraid of firing people if they're going to steal from me or cause me any harm in the store. It's all about customer service, greeting people. You take care of your customers, you take a clean store, and you take care of your employees, and you'll have a successful business. And that's what I got for you.
Questions, commissioners?
Share.
Yes.
Can, Laura, can I have you go back to, because John, I want you to speak a little bit more about your budget, what you plan on. I see there were some updates that you plan on doing and how much you're budgeting on those things.
Yeah, so the flooring, we're gonna put flooring in, and I budgeted about $9,000 into the flooring. It's only 2,000 square foot from wall to wall in that whole store, so we're not gonna floor obviously the storage room. I do not need to put wood tile in, but the sales floor will be all the wood grain, and so I budgeted 9,000 for that. The black gondola and shelves is right around $20,000 with shipping. It's gotta come from New Jersey unless I can source it somewhere cheaper, but they really are really proud of their gondolas. And then the camera system, I have down $2,000. I think that might go up because I have a security team or company that I'm gonna have come in and do it. And so they can handle some of this stuff and put in security door alarms and stuff. So that might go up a little bit. 3-door cooler, brand new is about $12,000. That's why I'm only gonna go with one to start out with, to make sure I can function everything and feel, I gotta get a feel for the store, the P&L and all the cash flow. And then painting's about $2,000, because we just gotta paint above the gondola and around the walls and take care of that. Business funding, I have a line of credit right now for $130,000. And then personal funds, I've got my retirement, and then I have cash to make up the 140. I do have more if I need to, but I'd like to keep one of my retirement accounts in case something happens.
Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioners? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Next up, we have John Noran. Let's make sure to state the name for the record and check. So key times on the this.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. My name is John Norani.
John, before you begin, I'm going to give you 7 minutes, same spiel. If we interrupt you for whatever reason with a question, it will not go against your time. I'll give you about a 30-second warning. That sound fair?
Sounds good.
Okay.
I appreciate the opportunity to present for Florence Liquor Store. Next slide. Next slide. I have 25 years of retail business experience. Married for 25 years, 2 children. My wife is a school teacher. My son is in 3rd year architecture in Houston. And my daughter is, she is in 1st year pre-law, UW-Madison. Next slide. My professional experience starts from running, managing and being part owner of Golden Jewels in Tucson, Arizona from 1997 to 1999. Then I moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin to open up my own store, which I operated from 1999 to 2019. Then in 2019, the mall decided to change focus and turn that property into condominium and office space. So I lost my lease and I moved to Houston, Texas, opened up another store down there, which I operated from 2019 to 2020. During COVID, the business has shut down and I came across an opportunity to move to West and operate the Springfield liquor store, which I did from 2020 to 2023. Next slide, please. During 2022 to 2023, when I operated the store, I was able to maintain the outstanding agent evaluation and the audit during that time, it shows the strength of my inventory control. So the total sale was $2.3 million, while the shortage of inventory was $410. Next slide, please. This graph shows the sales history. It's a 5-year data for Florence store from 2018 to 2022. There is a straight decline. A second store did open up in 2019, which could count for the decline, but not entirely. Next slide, please. Now, these are the 14 best categories in the state, out of which the Florence store was only able to perform in positive growth for only 3 out of 14. Next slide, please. This slide shows all the 6 stores at the coast, while it highlights the negative growth, which only this particular store had, which was 4.43%. It's a challenging store, and I like to take challenges because there's opportunity in there. These are the best-selling SKUs, high-dollar premium items, which are currently missing from the Florence store. And this chart shows the state rank and year growth for the state. Next slide, please. Current location, it is at a junction of 126 and 101. Location is great, but the shopping center is very old and it's dated. What is available? Market is tight. There are only 2 spots available right now. This slide highlights how the store looks like now on the left and what is my vision for the store on the right. As you can see, the store is very crowded and very busy. From customer point of view, you cannot focus on one item. Next slide, please. What needs to be done? It's a standard refacing stuff, which is for most of the liquor stores, like change the old shelvings, replacing with the new, enlarge space for wider aisle, expand inventory selection, accurate and enhance customer service, replace entire POS, and put up multiple checkout registers. Next slide, please. This shows the timeline, and it shows what I will be achieving in 6 months on the left. Ideally, it would be to move to a newer location. And if not possible, then try to enlarge this current space by adding another 2,000 square feet. The store right now is only 2,000 square feet. And to give customer a modern shopping experience, the store has to be at least 4,000 square feet plus. Expanding the selection, currently the Florence store is not a one-stop shopping center. They are not serving beer and wine. I would like to add that. Big selection of cigars, and I would like to add chocolate, truffles, and gift items related to coast and Florence area because it's a tourist destination. During this 2.5 years in which I operated the Springfield liquor store, my focus on customer service is reflected in this Google review slide. Next slide. This shows the current hours versus the proposed hours. Next slide, please. Next one. This is the current team in place, and they all are willing to stay, and I would like to keep them intact. But at the same time, I will be working more for the team towards customer service and product knowledge. Next slide, please.
You get a little over 30 seconds.
Okay. I firmly believe Florence store is a diamond in rough. I know how to cut and polish it to bring out its true potential. Thank you.
Questions?
Chair?
Yes.
This current location, what's the lease? Is the lease up?
It's month to month.
It is month to month right now. And you did make, you would like to move, but you made a mention, you noted that the market's pretty tight right now and there's only 2, you said, locations available.
Yes.
Did you say that you had pinpointed one of the locations as to potentially where you'd want to take this liquor store?
Not right now.
No, not right now.
Not
Okay.
right now. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. After moving to the current, cleaning up the current store,
Yeah,
then at the same time, I can look around more and be focused more. Yeah.
but it is in your 5-year plan, I think is right.
It's,
Okay.
it is.
Commissioners? Okay, the commission will now go into executive session to deliberate on the agent selection process to the authority of ORS 192.6602A. Thank you. We are reconvening the May 18th meeting at 2:27 regarding the selection of the retail store, Florence store 1077. Have a motion.
Yes. Commissioner Jacqueline Porter, for the record, I move to appoint John Myers as the permanent agent for store 1077.
Lauren?
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Japon Porter.
Yes.
Commissioner Melinas,
Yes.
Chair Raval.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, very much, and we wish you well. And please keep us in mind for other opportunities that will be coming along the way. We are now going to go back to a point related to the review and discussion of the draft vendor allocation policy. Okay, have a motion, please.
Chair,
Yes,
I move that the commission approve the vendor allocated distilled spirits policy and direct Director Prinz to implement the policy at the earliest date possible after all notice requirements are met.
thank you.
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Japon Porter,
Yeah.
Commissioner Melinas,
Yes.
Chair Raval.
Yes. Now we're going to go into compliance. Ratification of by stipulated settlements. That's going to be who? You?
Victoria.
Okay, there she is.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Good afternoon, Chair Raval. For the record, my name is Victoria Brown. I am a case presenter with the Administrative Hearings Division. We have 9 stipulated settlements for your review today. 4 alcohol compliance, 2 marijuana compliance, and 3 licensing related matters. I'm happy to answer questions you might have.
So Commissioners, any questions related to the alcohol stipulated settlement agreements?
And for me.
Okay. May I have a motion, please? Yes.
Chair? In regards to the alcohol, oh, I'm sorry, was Commissioner Kern, did you have a question? Forgive me. In regards to the alcohol violation, settlement agreements, I move to ratify the 4 alcohol stipulated settlement agreements as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Kern,
Yes.
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Japong Porter,
Yes.
Commissioner Melinas,
Yes.
Chair Raval.
Yes. Thank you. Marijuana stipulated settlements.
Yeah.
Victoria?
Yes, Chair, was there a question that you would like me to answer?
Yeah.
No.
All right.
Nope.
Please.
I move to ratify the 2 marijuana, stipulated settlement agreements as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Kern,
Yes.
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Japong Porter,
Yes.
Commissioner Melinas,
Yes.
Chair Raval.
Yes. License stipulated settlement agreements. Any questions? Ma'am? Please.
Chair.
Yeah.
I move to ratify the 3 licensing stipulated settlement agreements as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Kern,
Yes.
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Japong Porter,
Yes.
Commissioner Melinas,
Yes.
Chair Raval.
Yes. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
Director.
Yeah, I wanted to, want to thank Ms. Postgate for the motion on the vendor allocation policy. We got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to let everyone know, this is the first chapter, is focusing on these vendor allocated spirits. This was kind of a controlling that piece. This will be several more chapters. So chapter 2 will be getting into what our employees can do, because they have a right in statute to buy distilled spirits, and we want to clarify that. And then also chapter 3, I think, will be working on, in this policy, it references charitable or nonprofit organizations, making sure we have clear direction on that. I think is another place we can focus on. And then the last area that is in my mind is then what happens with these rare spirits when they get into the agent's hands and they're in the store. What do we do at that level? And again, Rich has been working on this. Rich Evans has been working on this, looking at the manual and looking at that. So I just wanted to set the table. This is one step. This is an iterative process of clarifying for all of our partners and our staff. I want to thank you for joining me and the employees in signing on to that policy today. Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Wait.
Executive session.
You did executive session.
That's right.
Executive sessions pursuant to ORS 192.6602F to consider information or records that are exempt from public inspection.
Close the meeting. I think it's okay to say, or appropriate to say, that you'll be going back into open, but closing it from executive session, that you won't be coming back into this room.
And as instructed, once we have finished with the executive session, we will not be reconvening in this room. The meeting will be adjourned.
Yeah, or you'll close, yes.